Okay, zoning board, we are live. We are recording. Phone lines are open. Go for it.
Thank you, Matt, and welcome everyone to the Town of East Hampton Zoning Board of Appeals meeting of June 27th, 2023. We have two canceled public hearings this evening. One is 133 SP LLC at 133 Sayers Path in Waynescott, Suffolk, tax map number 300-197-6-13. The next canceled public hearing is June 09 LLC at 9 Tyson Lane in East Hampton, tax map number 300-189-6-2.3. We'll get into our scheduled public hearings, and I'll read the first one into the record. The first one is Michael Frischberg at 4 Osborne Farm Lane in Waynescott, Suffolk, tax map number 300-197-8-11. The size and location is 22,781 square feet at 4 Osborne Farm Lane, map of Osborne Farm filed 1/10/1986, map number 8046 in Waynescott. The description is to allow a two-story addition to remain outside of the town's pyramid setback and 14.2 feet from the side yard line, lot line where 15 feet is required. The relief sought is one variance of approximately 1 foot pursuant to 255-11-72D of the East Hampton Town Code is required to allow a second-story addition to remain outside the pyramid law regulations, and one variance of 0.8 feet pursuant to 255-11-10 of the Town Code is to allow the addition to remain 14.2 feet from the southeastern lot line where 15 foot is required. The zoning district is A2 residence. Zone X flood zone, and the secret class is type 2. And council, do we have proper affidavit of service and posting?
I haven't seen them. Applicant here?
We have.
Are they in the file? Oh dear.
Oh, they were? I didn't send them to me. You emailed them over?
Well, we can see it's posted.
It was posted, John. I don't know. I mean, I haven't seen the affidavit of service and posting unless it's in the
Proceed,
public.
presuming it's been done, and if we can't verify that, we'll have to deal with it then, but she forwards them to me. I'll take a look while we're moving forward.
Yeah, I think we should move forward. We could, I mean, if we have to, we could probably leave the record open
Okay,
for a couple of days to verify it, right?
all right. Then I can take a look at them if they're in the file.
I think what you want to say is you assume we have jurisdiction.
Right.
You assume we have jurisdiction.
We'll leave the record open for verification.
Yeah. Well, otherwise they have to renotice it.
Oh, okay.
I don't know if you can read them.
No, they wouldn't, no.
You want to forward?
We don't want them to have to do it.
They don't have a proper affidavit of notice and service, don't they have to renotice it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sure it was done, but Rob is not here.
Yeah.
Probably has it in his office.
John, there is this affidavit of service and posting
I was just gonna
on
say,
the
look at-
public file.
I'll take a look. while you
Would you
guys-
like to review it?
I'll do that while you can move forward with
All
that.
right, thanks. I'm just waiting. Laura's in the
Oh,
way of the
you can do it. Yeah, just finish that.
screen.
No worries.
So I visited the site, and this is a photo of the posting. Second. Next. This is taking a look at the residence as you drive up the driveway. You'll see the next photo. The farm is to the right of this, of the property of the house. Next photo. This is looking at along the property line that is affected by the addition and the variance requested. And you can see in numerous photos, you can see that the screening is well screened here, very well screened. Next photo. So what you're looking at is the addition on the left side of this residence, and it's the first corner of the house that is affected by the variance. That's requested by the variance. Next. Just looking a little bit past into the backyard along the property line. I take a look back from the rear to the front of the property, and you can see the corner of the space between the corner that is requesting a variance and the screening on the right-hand side. I believe that's the last photo. We have the applicant here this evening. We don't have the applicant. Okay, John, I think we're still going to proceed if we don't have the applicant here. Perhaps we can have the planning department come up. This is Morgan's. How are you, Morgan?
Good. Morgan Slater from the Planning Department.
Morgan, do you swear affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
So the property is located in the cul-de-sac of Osborne Farm Lane and is contiguous to agricultural land to the north and west, and it's within the agricultural overlay district. There's a 2,459 square foot residence with pool, patio, deck, and a pool house on the parcel. The building permit for the residence was issued in 1999, and numerous improvements have been made to the property since then, many of which required ARB approval. The scenic easement seen on the survey appears on a 2001 certificate of occupancy, so it's likely that it was created with the subdivision. The total lot coverage is 5,411 square feet, where 11,391 square feet is allowed, and the clearing is 14,731 square feet, where 15,695 square feet is allowed. The current owner acquired the residence in 2018, and there have been building permits issued over the last 5 years for expanding the residence, adding a lower level rec room, decking, a new pool and pool house, a patio, and other improvements. There are currently 3 open building permits from 2021, which are renewed in April of this year, and that's why some structures shown on the survey submitted with the application do not appear on the 2019 certificate of occupancy. I just want to note that there is a bin on the survey that's depicted approximately 2 feet from the property line. However, upon a visit to the property, this appears to have been moved alongside the eastern side of the house.
I'm sorry, would you repeat that?
There's, you can see it, there's a tiny bin that's shown on the survey here, but when visiting the property, it's been moved. The building permit for the 2-story addition was issued in February of 2021, and those plans depicted the addition 15 feet from the property line and within the pyramid setbacks. However, the addition was built 9.6 inches closer to the east, which resulted in the addition being 14.2 feet from the property line and approximately 1 foot outside the pyramid law boundary. There is vegetative screening along the affected property line, and the board should determine if this sufficiently mitigates the requested variance, and if the benefit of granting the variance to the applicant outweighs any detriment to nearby properties, since the difficulty is self-created. Other than that, I can answer any questions the board may have.
What is the land that's most affected by this? How is it? Is it a private residence?
Yeah, it's a private residence. I can pull up the aerial to get an idea.
Maureen, can you, while you're there, can you just blow up that survey? You can, when you're done, if you want to change.
So the residence that we're talking about is bordered in blue, and then this is the property that's affected by the variance.
And that's just the driveway of the neighbor.
So taking a look at, I mean, if you take a look at the survey again and what's affected, it's a corner of the, it's not the entire length of the addition, because of the property line is skewed. So I just wanted to point that out. Any other questions?
I have one.
Anybody have any questions?
No, I don't.
Mr. Chairman, I was able to review the affidavits of posting and mailing, and they're in order.
Thank you. So with that, I'm going to make a motion in the application of Michael Frischberg at 4 Osborne Farm Lane in Wayne-Scott, Suffolk, map number 300-197-8-11. To close the public hearing in the public record.
Second.
I concur.
I concur.
Concur.
Thank you. Our next public hearing is Andrew Kaufman, 50 Oyster Shores Road, East Hampton, Suffolk tax map number 300-192-6-19. Size and location is 20,933 square feet at 50 Oyster Shores Road, map of Hampton Waters, number 2799, lot 35 in East Hampton. The description is a demolition of a 1,500 square foot, one-story residence and swimming pool and the construction of a 3,200 square foot, two-story residence, swimming pool, decking, and driveway on a parcel of land containing tidal wetlands and coastal bluffs. The relief sought is a natural resources special permit pursuant to 255-420, variances from 255-430, minimum wetland setbacks, and 255-440 coastal setbacks of the town code, and any other relief necessary. The following 6 variances are required. Variances of 38 feet, 60 feet, and 66 feet are required to permit the residence swimming pool and pool patio and house patio to be located 62 feet, 40 feet, and 66 feet respectively from wetlands where a 100-foot setback is required. A 74.7-foot variance is required to locate the sanitary system 125.3 feet from wetlands where 200-foot setback is required. Variances of 22.6 feet and 10.4 feet are required to construct the pool, patio, and house patio 27.4 feet and 39.6 feet respectively from the bluff crest where 50-foot setback is required. Zoning district is B residence, VE, and X flood zones, and a secret class is type 2. Council, do we have proper affidavit of service and posting?
We submitted them.
Sent it?
Yes.
The attachment didn't open on it. If you want to resend it. In the meantime, if you want to proceed.
Give you my word that we submitted them with the
They
affidavit.
they too are in the public record files.
Can we proceed? Wow.
Okay, thank you. This again is my my area. So I visited the site, and this actually had 2 postings on it. Would you need it? But just to be covering your bases. So this is the first posting. Next is the second posting. Now, this is a house that's existing. It's going to be fully demolished. This is the driveway going in. You'll see a lot of arborvitaes, both on the front of the lot and the side of the lot. Not, we can take a look at it. I'm not sure if it's going to be part of the completion, but anyway, those arborvitaes are existing. Go next photo. Taking a look at the existing front yard. I scan over to the left, next photo. That's basically where the house is going to be situated in that area there, because they're going to be pulling it back. Next. Again, just a closer look and getting closer to the existing residence and the driveway. Next. Okay, I'm going to now start walking around the left side of this house into the backyard, in particular, just so we can take a look at the conditions near 3 Mile Harbor. This is looking along the property line, looking out towards the harbor. I'm going to walk into the backyard. But next, again, the corner of the property line. Next, this is the photo of the pool that is existing very close to the harbor itself, pre-existing zoning, and we'll see that that's stated in this TAM. Next, a little bit closer look at the pool. Next, this is now at the bulkhead, the retaining wall, not a bulkhead. It's a retaining wall. I want to make sure of that. It's a retaining wall for the pool, and you can see how close it is to the edge of the water. It was low tide at this point. I'm going to have a photo that shows how close you'll see it is to the water. Next. Now taking a look from the top of the pool along the shoreline. Next. This is from the top of the pool looking back at the residence. Next. Is that it?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Thought I had some photo down below, but I think we definitely got the gist of it. Okay, John.
Hi, John Tarbett for the applicant, Pamela and Andrew Kaufman are here as well. They're the owners of the property. So this project was a few years in the working. Originally, the applicant considered maybe trying to do an addition off the back of the house, small addition. The board has expressed willingness to grant some small variances sometimes. The existing house is 1,500 square feet, so I thought maybe they would do a bump off the back of the house to get a little more living space. In return for giving up some, if not all, of the pre-existing nonconformities, of which there are many. The existing sanitary system is right next to that pool, so that it's sitting in groundwater a few feet from 3 Mile Harbor. The pool, as you see in the pictures, is sitting essentially in 3 Mile Harbor. There's a retaining wall keeping it there. There's lawn down to the water. The entire property slopes downhill. So it gave serious consideration to doing that small addition off the back. And then they considered just redeveloping the property altogether, which is where we are now. And part of the reason for that was they realized what they could offer the zoning board in return for a variance to rebuild the property, essentially adding a second story. Granted, it's not going to look anything like, I'm not saying that we're going to tear that existing house down. So I'm not trying to say we just want to add a second story to it. But essentially, if you take a 1,500 square foot house, which is what we have there now, and you add, and this is an important point, we originally were looking for a 3,308 square foot house. That's what we applied for. After the TAM came out, we have reduced that to 2,972, just to try to get it a little smaller. So if we have a 1,500 square foot house, we're going to come in just a little less and adding a second story to it. Oyster Shores Drive is about 26 homes fronting on 3 Mile Harbor. All of the homes were built before zoning, and they're all similarly situated. So it was before we had public water. So all this, you can expect that all the septic systems on Oyster Shores Road are sitting on the harbor side. At least from aerial photographs and the research I could do, they all have pre-existing lawns down to 3. So Oyster Shores Drive is probably one of our big contributors affecting 3 Mile Harbor, right? You have septic systems, you have houses that are sit within 100 feet, you have lawns that go down to the water. So if the board were to consider allowing people to build slightly bigger houses, you could get those septic systems, because now public water is available. That's the biggest change, right? So now you can actually move your septic systems to the street side of the property. And so if the board would consider allowing people to get slightly bigger homes, over time, those 26 properties could be redeveloped, and you could have a significant improvement to 3 Mile Harbor, because, like, for example, this property, it's 100% legally cleared. So we don't have to have a stitch of native vegetation on the property legally. We're proposing to bring it into full compliance with Harbor Protection Overlay District standards. We're taking our septic system, which is, I think, 19 feet from the wetland, and not a low nitrogen system. And we're saying, hey, we'll put 125 feet from the wetlands, make it meet the 4-foot separation required by Harbor Protection Overlay District, and it'll be a low nitrogen septic system. And we're moving our house and pool back, obviously. So the variance that we're asking for is essentially adding a second story to what is there now. And we're giving back all this, including, I'll call it the retaining wall, right? We're willing to give that up as well, which there's a whole section of the code which deals with, we would not be able to put that there now, obviously. So restoring the native shoreline is a huge improvement to 3 Mile Harbor. So then you get to, when you're reviewing applications, you're supposed to be looking at standards put out by statute. Is it going to hurt the environment? In an application like this, where you're asking for a tidal wetland variance, that's ultimately the most important question. Will it hurt the wetlands? And objectively, I think Brian would agree that this is better for, and I don't want to put words in his mouth, let him speak, but you can't argue that this is not significantly better than what's there now. And to me, just as somebody who, this has been something I've thought about a lot over the years. Like we have to incentivize people to make these changes, because otherwise they just take the 1,500 square foot house and they make it out of gold, right? That's what happens in a lot of these areas. When they're not given appropriate relief from the zoning board, they just make better what they have there, and you don't get all these huge environmental benefits to 3 Mile Harbor. So to me, these are really important applications, because I want the other, of the 26 homes on Oyster Shores Road, there's a couple that were given permits for 4,000 or 5,000 square feet. A couple that have small additions off the back, and the rest of them are just sitting there with no incentive to come before you and say, hey, I want a bigger house, but I'm willing to give you all this. So to me, this was a home run of an application. It was, despite what the TAM says, a lot of time was spent thinking about this to try to create the best scenario possible. One of the things that TAM said was the septic system could have been moved to the other side of the property. There is topography in the file. You can see that that's about a 5 foot, that corner of the property is about a 5 foot drop over about 15 feet. Putting a septic system in that location, actually, harbor protection overlay standards say that you should try to avoid significant changes to topography. So that would be in violation of what harbor protection is saying. I mean, you would have to significantly regrade that property to get a septic system in at huge expense. And it actually wouldn't gain any additional separation from the waters of 3 Mile Harbor. It's the wetlands being, the tidal wetland that septic system is closest to is in the middle of the wooded lot next door, which was preserved land. There may be wetlands there, but the waters of 3 Mile Harbor are not there. The waters of 3 Mile Harbor are the same distance, whether you're on either side of the property. It's out in front of the house. It also yes, if this were vacant land and we came before you, it'd probably be considered an aggressive application, I imagine. But you can't look at it as vacant land. You have to look at it as land that was developed before zoning, which has just about every, would violate every zoning provision we have nowadays, and we're making significant improvements. And if I could just quickly, so the septic system is 19 feet. We're going to make it meet the 4 foot separation groundwater. We're going to make it low nitrogen. We're going to make it 125 feet, so 19 to 125 feet. We're putting it at the landward side of the house. The clearing right now is completely non-compliant, 100% legally cleared lot, and we're willing to bring that back to meet each pod clearing. So we actually, this entire project was designed to meet all the standards contained in the Harbor Protection Overlay District regulations. So everything in those regulations we're proposing to meet. We are offering, the swimming pool is completely non-compliant, so the Harbor Protection Overlay standards talk about all the different ways pools should be built to comply with Harbor Protection Overlay standards. Obviously, the existing one is not. We're going to meet those standards. The house also would be designed to meet Harbor Protection Overlay standards, and the driveway, which is not currently compatible, would be a compatible driveway. We're proposing to remove the retaining wall. And then you just get into these enormous improvements we can make. The house can go from 42 feet to 75 feet. The pool can go from 10 feet to 50 feet. The pool deck can go from 5 feet from the wetlands to 42 feet. So while we cannot meet 100-foot separation of this property, nobody in Oyster Shores Road will ever meet 100-foot separation. They're all going to require variance to be rebuilt. All you can do is do the best you can. And we have done that. I quickly went into some of the, I'm not going to reread my memo. The board can read that or has read that already. But I did want to point out that granting relief like this has been something the board has considered doing in the past. And again, if you actually follow the statutory requirements, going to the 5-point test, we can meet all those standards. And when I read the TAM, I see that we talk about the benefits of 3 Mile Harbor, and we all agree on those benefits. I don't see any analysis in the TAM saying how this will either hurt or improve upon the existing environmental conditions. I think it's objectively easy to say that we are 100% improving on it. And I'd be interested in the plan department's opinion on that, because if we're here saying, hey, we want to improve environmental conditions, then we meet the standards required for a variance.
What does the definition of a slightly bigger house mean?
If I said slightly bigger house, then, I mean, we're going to go 1,500 to 2,972.
This is more than that, though. There's a lot of program here. There's a lot of hardscape, a lot of patios, a lot of deck. It's a big house. It's an aggressive design from what you see along the shoreline. This is part of the SAS area. So we're looking at shoreline, we're looking at Vista, we're looking at 3 Mile Harbor as a whole, as you look. And you're proposing, it seems to me you're proposing a much larger scale than what's existing there, and what I think the town is seeking to protect, not just environmentally, but from a character of the neighborhood in the Vista, orderly growth and stuff like that.
Well,
So the question is, what is slightly larger? What is orderly growth?
Well, I do object to saying that this is an aggressive rebuild, right? It meets all existing.
I said it appears to be.
It meets all existing zoning requirements. You can build a 3,400 square foot house there under a gross floor area law, which is supposed to be, if you meet the gross floor area law, you're supposed to be in keeping with the character of the neighborhood. We're 400 or 500 square feet under that. So while you may say that 2,900 square feet is a large home, I don't think it is. I think when you have a 1,500 square foot house there and you want to add essentially what would be a second story, or if you did a 750 square foot addition off the back, then you're at 2,250. Like, I would object to saying that somehow this is not in keeping with the character of the neighborhood. There's 90 Oyster Shores Road is a 6,000 square foot house. 12 Island Drive is a 4,400 square foot house, all approved natural resource special permits by the board. So just because I don't know how you can say that's too big a house. It meets all criteria. There's no, I mean, other than just saying I think it's too big a house. There's no.
I just said my question started off as, what is a slightly bigger house? What is the definition of one? Where do we start? And
Well, I think if somebody, I actually think if somebody wanted to maximize gross floor area in this lot based on all the mitigation, it would still be a good project.
You're basically contending that this project is larger, but that there's a net positive to the environment here because of moving the pool, coming back from the shoreline, heading the IA system.
Yeah, a septic system, pool, revegetation, coming into conformance with harbor protection overlay regulations where this property sits. These are all what the code wants. And I don't think I have to make it's objectively 100% better. And again, you're supposed to be looking at the benefit to the applicant versus the detriment to the neighborhood. And there is no detriment here, right? This is a positive. So is there a benefit? There's a benefit for sure. He wants a bigger house. Is there a detriment? Absolutely not. If you follow the 5 statutory, if you actually do what the statute said you're supposed to do, then you'll find that, for example, is it going to hurt the environment? Absolutely not, right? And so if the planning department wants to object to this house, they should analyze it in relation to our code and say, well, here's why. They shouldn't say it's too big a house or it could be better. They should say, is there a net positive? Like you said, is there a net positive or a net negative? Nobody should come in and ask for a net negative. They should come into you. And the question is, I think we've done, you were going by in your sailboat or walking along the shoreline after this was done, would you be happier or sad? If you wanted to swim in front of this, would you be happier swimming when when you know that the septic system 125 feet and it's a low nitrogen septic system on the other side of the house, or would you swim knowing that there's a septic system sitting 19 feet from where you're swimming in wetlands? Would you rather see the house, if you're on your sailboat, would you rather see a 50% revegetated property versus 100% cleared property? You know, and if you tell me, well, I don't like 3,000 square foot houses, then that's nothing I can do. But I mean, that's just your opinion. I can't change that. But from every objective standard, whether you're walking, swimming, or sailing on 3 Mile Harbor, you should be much happier having this house built than what's there now. I mean, there's a retaining wall built into 3 Mile Harbor, and there's a pool sitting on top of it with a lawn, a septic system. We're putting 8,000 square feet of vegetation on the shoreline and getting rid of the shore hardening structure. So, you know, as somebody who does use 3 Mile Harbor, who grew up here, I'm offended that the planning department objects to these things. They're such good applications that we should be supporting and rewarding. And instead, you know, I see it, I've been seeing it for 20 years now. I see these things get denied, and I see the septic system just stay right. I see the revegetation, I see the lawn staying nuclear green right down to the wetlands, and I see the septic system sitting right where they are. And yeah, I see a smaller house, but I just think that we should be supporting and encouraging people to do these projects.
Anybody have any questions? Is this the latest survey? Did you submit a revised survey? Is this the latest survey?
That is the latest survey.
But it doesn't say that retaining walls to be removed.
It doesn't say the retaining walls to be removed.
So do we need an updated survey that?
If you were to approve it, you could say as a condition of approval that we have to do that.
The date on the survey was May 31st, 2023. Is that correct?
That's right.
It's the one we got the other day.
Yeah.
And your architectural plans are dated that also, right?
Well, we had to
Updated-
resubmit plans because the house got slightly smaller, so we did resubmit plans.
Good. Any other questions?
No, no.
Thank you. Thank you.
Planning.
Brian, how are you?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, board members. Brian Frank, Chief Environmental Analyst for the town.
Brian, do you swear affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
I'd like to do this from the presentation station for starters. I want to start by showing you the neighborhood a little bit. As John had mentioned, this is on Oyster Shores Road, and Oyster Shores Road is a mix of non-conforming development. The town's natural resource special permit regulations go back to 1984, so we're talking about almost 40 years of this being a regulated area. This is the southern portion of 3 Mile Harbor. It's north of what we consider the head of harbor area, but it's still the southern portion of 3 Mile Harbor. It's off of Springy Banks, and this area is one of the best examples of the groundwater flow that flows from the upland aquifer. There's a lot of hydraulic head here, and the water that flows out on the beach here is the reason that Springy Banks Road has the name that it does. These are the Springy Banks. There's a mix of development out here in terms of location and scale. This is the subject property. This is the Kaufman property as it exists in 2022. And you can see that a number of the houses are located close to the street, and that's true if you were to go up Oyster Shores Road. I'll get to it a little bit later, but John's characterization of they all have lawns down to the water is obviously inaccurate and grossly oversimplified. There are properties that do have lawns to the water. Most of those are farther south from here in areas of South Pond Road and Island Road. And if there's a question about that, I can open up GIS and we can surf around and take a look at anywhere along 3 Mile Harbor and Oyster Shores that you want. John's characterization, as well as a lot of what he stated, has very limited accuracy. I want to move now to a closer view of the property. This is a closer view of the Kaufman's property. This is the swimming pool and the retaining wall around it. There's probably no swimming pool that's any closer to the surface waters of 3 Mile Harbor than this property. I know that sometimes the topography is not very visible on the screen there. John has some questions about or raises some issues about the wetland line without really challenging it, but just to dispel any questions. I don't know if you can see this contour line on this property to the south. I'm guessing that's a no. I'm sorry, you have this in your folder. I don't know that there's much I can do to make this clearer. Maybe I should start using a heavier line when we do this.
Oh, we can see that.
I can see it now.
So this area is 4 feet above sea level, and it's close enough to the water table to support a wetland plant community from the shoreline there. And that's why the wetland boundary to the south of the property dips in the way it does. The wetland boundary starts around here on your survey. It comes down, it moves along the shoreline, and it continues correctly as it was flagged over here. And it's really in this area over here. Now, I'm going to get to the wetland boundary a little bit more, but I think it's important to recognize that the wetlands were flagged back in 2013. We said to use this area as the wetland boundary. This was the area that was used as the wetland boundary in the Kaufman's 2014 application for a very small addition on the landward side of the house. It was verified again in 2020 as the wetland boundary. When they changed surveyors, the change in the mean high water boundary wasn't caught, and that's why a different line was used in this application. I want to be clear that I don't think that's a reflection of the surveyor at all. If anything, that might be, it was something that my staff overlooked when they did the later delineation. And I think it's kind of obvious. Maybe I'll show you a couple of photos from the property because I think it's, oh goodness, where does it keep going? I think it's relevant, and I think it really shows some of the constraints. So this is the view of the existing residence from the shoreline. You can see it's a one-story house, fairly rectangular. This is the retaining wall of the swimming pool, and it is built as a retaining wall. You'd never be able to dig a hole here without it filling up with water if you didn't build a retaining wall and backfill it to elevate it up to get a pool there. Another point that's kind of obvious, without the swimming pool in that location, there's no reason for a retaining wall there. It's not a revetment, as John characterized in his memorandum of law. It's not really an erosion control structure, but it's reconstruction. Because it is along the shoreline there, its reconstruction would be prohibited by the Coastal Erosion Overlay District regulations. You can kind of see where the rack line is, the debris line. This is the corner of the property. This is about where the wetland line is shown on the survey on the east side or the south side rather of the swimming pool. The area to the north of the swimming pool is pretty obvious as a wetland location, even if you're not really literate in wetland boundaries. So this is the corner of the swimming pool retaining wall now. This is an area of rack and phragmites. It's hard to get the flagging ribbons to stay on here when the vegetation is this wispy, especially over the winter. And that's why when it appears that a vegetated area like this coincides with mean high water, that was the reason it was directed in 2013 to be used as the wetland boundary. This is the most recent survey of the property. I've been speaking with the Kaufmans on and off for probably 4 years or more. They came to originally to the planning department about reconstructing the swimming pool. The planning department conceptually supported a reconstruction of the swimming pool that reoriented the swimming pool instead of being perpendicular to the house, orienting it parallel to the house with the removal of the retaining wall. Despite the magnitude of the variance that an application like that would have, that's a benefit that I felt comfortable supporting to this board. The removal of that retaining wall, the naturalization of that shoreline, giving the wetlands room to migrate, removing all that fill is a big environmental benefit. Over time, they had asked about an addition on the landward side of the house, about a 500 square foot addition. And the planning department also thought that was reasonable. Again, with the caveat that we make recommendations, we don't make decisions, the board makes decisions, and I could only speak for the department, not the board. So when this application was submitted, I was really surprised that it was a redevelopment of this scale. And I gave John Tarbett the professional courtesy of a phone call that says, I don't know how long you've been involved in this, but this is my history with the property, and I don't know if something got lost along the way in translation, but this is not something that I ever discussed with the Kaufmans as anything that the planning department would support or consider a reasonable application. And it's not, for the reasons that are laid out in the technical analysis memorandum. The application, you picked up on it, Mr. Chairman, right away. John describes this as a slightly larger house. The house is twice the size of the house that's there now. The reduced version is a 98% increase in gross floor area. The coverage increase right now from 1824 to 2310 is a 26% increase. And as you had mentioned, with the decking and the hardscape and the driveway around it, the total coverage of the property is going up to 45%, where 50 is the max. The property is within 388 square feet of the maximum gross floor area. And I think it's important to point out that these maximums on coverages, total coverage, gross floor area are standalone zoning limitations. That's what's required if this house were in the middle of a fallow field inland, 10 miles away from any wetland or coastline or water body. Those would be a part of the dimensional setbacks, just like the side yard setback or the front yard setback. Those maximums are not a matter of right when you lack a conforming building envelope. And I think that's important to recognize here. When you're considering these applications, this is a property that lacks a conforming building envelope. They don't have a location on the property where they could meet the 100-foot setback for structures. They don't have a location that could meet the 200-foot setback for a sanitary system. John had mentioned it meets all HPOD regulations. The 200-foot sanitary setback is an HPOD requirement. So saying it meets all of HPOD's requirements is just inaccurate. It doesn't. This is a property that the planning department doesn't object to the granting of variances for, doesn't object to the granting of a larger house, doesn't even object to the granting of a house with a swimming pool. They do have some leverage, for lack of a better word. What's there is completely non-conforming, obviously. But the scale of the residence, the scale of this as new construction, and that's what it is. I'll get to John's characterization a little bit later. But when you're building an addition onto an existing residence, your maximum setback is driven by where that pre-existing structure is. At some point, you have to attach that addition to what's there. So even if you build on the landward side of what was on the original house, like the Kaufmans did a few years ago, they needed a 30-foot variance to do that. Arguably, you couldn't get any farther away. When you're tearing down development, when you're putting in a new foundation, when you're installing a new sanitary system, you have an opportunity to not necessarily treat it as a vacant lot that's never been developed before, but you have an opportunity to build as close as you can to today's zoning requirements. And John is 100% wrong. Our wetland setbacks and our natural resource special permit regulations are part of zoning. They are a part of the standards that development on this lot has to meet. So when John says it meets all standards, the fact that they meet front yard setbacks and pyramid and side yard setbacks doesn't mean that they meet the standards for the granting of the wetland variances that they've asked for. And it doesn't mean they meet the standards of a natural resources special permit. It's not my job necessarily, it's not really the planning department's responsibility to point out how this is bad for the environment. I can do some of that now, but it's really John's obligation to point, I'm sorry, it's the applicant's obligation to point out how an application meets the variance standards. And nowhere in the variance standards does it say, if what you're proposing is better than what's there now, you meet the variance standards. That's not a parameter. That's not part of New York State town law. That was never incorporated into 850D, which is the variance standards that the boards needs to consider. And the town did make an implication that construction should be 100 feet away from the wetlands. That's why it's a minimum setback. It's not a suggestion. It's a minimum setback. Anytime you're varying that, you're arguably having a greater impact on the environment than is ideal. The closer you get to the wetland, the larger the scale of the development, and the more you repeat that on our mostly residentially zoned shoreline, the greater those impacts become. So, John's characterization that I don't know what the planning department is looking at for the last 20 years really shows a fundamental lack of understanding of what zoning is, what the setbacks are, what the special permit regulations are designed to do. They're designed to direct development in the most conforming locations possible. This application on every level fails to do that. These variances are substantial. This is basically, I wish I could go back and forth to the aerial a little less clumsily. I apologize. But I'm going to go back to the survey in a minute, and I apologize that I am not doing this as smooth as I'd like. But essentially, the new swimming pool is being proposed where the house is, and the house is being proposed landward of that. And it requires a greater than 50-foot variance. I think that's numerically substantial. It's a greater reduction of more than 50% of what the required setback of 100 feet is. This area of the property does have the highest elevations. Our zoning code relaxes front yard setbacks on all waterfront lots other than oceanfront lots to allow a greater separation from the water. So this property, it doesn't have to meet a 20-foot setback from the street. It's allowed to meet a 15-foot setback to encourage development to move away from the water. Let's see if I can do this a little bit more gracefully. God, doggone it, I can't. I'm going to go back to the survey because I do think that the survey really tells the story of this application. This distance from this corner of the house to the street is 37 feet, about 37, 38 feet. These surveys were not submitted to scale, so I measured this off of the, using the PDF measuring tool. This distance from this corner of the house to about the closest portion of the street is almost 60 feet.
You pointing to something?
I'm sorry?
Are you pointing to something when you say?
Yeah, is it, can you see the hand?
Oh, there's the hand, okay.
I
I
apologize.
didn't see the hand.
All right, I'm sorry. What amounts to the northwest corner of the house to the street is about 57 feet. The southwest corner of the house to the street is about 37 feet. This sanitary system, what's not on this survey that was on the earlier survey and you can see on the plans? There's a well in this location here. And that well location was what was described to me as the reason why the sanitary system had to be located down here. Not the elevations, not the slopes. And the new on-site wastewater treatment systems do have electronic components. They do pump uphill on a fairly regular basis. So the idea that the sanitary system going into this slope would be a problem really is something that I don't think John has demonstrated. But if this area isn't used for the sanitary system, at least some of it should be used for the structures. You've got to maximize setbacks. A number of the variance standards speak to, is it a self-created difficulty? Yeah, that's always, which by itself isn't dispositive. This lot was bought by the Kaufmans in 2012. None of the town zoning regulations have changed since then. they are what they were when they bought the property. Does that make it a self-created difficulty? In part, to a certain extent, it does. The most important variance standard here is that variances are, is the variance substantial? Yes, it's numerically substantial. This is 42 feet. This is 33 feet from what functions as the top of the bluff here. I don't know how that's not numerically substantial. Are the variances the minimum? Are there alternatives is really what the variance standards say. And absolutely, is a house with a smaller footprint that meets better setbacks on this property a reasonable alternative to this application? And the answer is yes. Is this a lot that the zoning code encourages to max out development? And this is pretty close to max out. Shaving, doubling the size of the house, coming in a few hundred square feet below the max GFA is still pretty close to max. There's still, as you noted, Mr. Chairman, there's extensive hardscape. There's patios around here. It is not an application that meets the natural resource special permit standards, and it certainly doesn't meet the variance standards. The character of the neighborhood one is probably the hardest one to articulate, because you really have to look at it as cumulative. If this application were repeated up and down Oyster Shores Road or anywhere else in town, and I think it's important to point out that in John's narrative, he makes references to other applications that the board recently decided that are not on 3 Mile Harbor. So don't believe that an application on Oyster Shores Road is limited to being compared to Oyster Shores Road. Attorneys like John are going to use it if they feel that it leverages their argument anywhere in town. So that's the summation of the planning department's recommendations, is that the house doesn't meet the minimum variance standards. It does exceed the constraints of the property, primarily because it lacks a conforming building and sanitary system envelope. And if you can really just, as John said, if you can build to the max GFA and it's still a good application, then what are the wetland setbacks there for? Why even have them? What purpose do they serve? If this would be an aggressive application as a completely vacant lot, which is what John hinted it might be, how is it 100 times better, which is what I think John said, 100% better, because it's a redevelopment. Is it better than what's there now? Well, the sanitary system is. There's no doubt about it. They're getting a low nitrogen or IA sanitary system over 100 feet away from the wetlands, where there's an older septic system close to the shoreline. That's demonstrably better. But the other elements of the application are not. The revegetation plan is poor. It is not consistent with the revegetation guidelines that the planning department would recommend here, because the species composition are not really what you find along the shoreline of Oyster Shores Road. And the planning department consistently tries in a revegetation. This is not landscaping. Landscaping is landscaping and revegetation is revegetation. We have a definition of revegetation in the code. And essentially what you're doing when you revegetate something is you naturalize it. You're planting the stuff that, or as close as you could to what would be there if there weren't development. You can have terrific native landscaping. That pollinator garden out front of Town Hall is a good example. There are a lot of great native plants there that are going to be great for for butterflies and dozens of different species of bees. But that's not revegetation, that's landscaping. And so is the plan that was submitted with this application. There is absolutely no detail about how that retaining wall is going to be removed. It's obviously in a sensitive area. It's very close to the shoreline. What material, what construction equipment is necessary to do it? What's the construction protocol for removing it? How is that material going to be graded in the end? John throwing this in the Friday before the hearing is sloppy. I'm sorry, there's not much way to characterize much of his submission as sloppy. This survey was dated May 31st. So were the building plans. John chose to sat on it until the Friday before the hearing, along with his narrative, to sandbag you guys. This easily could have been added to the file ahead of time, and there might have been an opportunity to say, hey, if the retaining wall is going to be removed, why not remove it? I have to, I have to address John's narrative. I hate to do this, but because he kind of maligns me in there personally, it's posted on the town's website. I can't let comments like that stand without addressing them. So,
While you're looking at that, let me have a few questions about the memorandum of law. In that, there's a little table. He said the swimming pool as proposed is fully compliant, including separation to groundwater. Is the swimming pool fully compliant, Brian?
I'll have to take a look if it meets a 4-foot separation. I'm not sure.
What is the word compliant? Compliant to
I'm sorry,
zoning?
it's a 2-foot separate. Well,
No, including separation to groundwater. So he's just saying that the swimming pool is fully compliant, but it's requiring variances, it's an NRSB,
well,
right? So I'm just questioning, is that a correct?
I think, John has to answer that.
Yep. Okay.
I'm assuming he means that it meets a 2-foot separation of groundwater and it uses a chlorine reducing sanitation system and it, the Harbor Protection Overlay District is an overlay on the zoning underneath it. So if you need variances from wetlands, when part of what HPOD is supposed to do is protect surface water wetlands, I don't know how you say that it's fully compliant to HPOD, but John will have to explain that. I thought I had brought up John's narrative because I want to, anyway, John on the bottom of his narrative characterizes the shoreline structure as an existing revetment. It's a retaining wall, and I think that's pretty clear. On the second page, as you said, John says it meets all current HPOD regulations. I can't articulate what that means. John mentions that it's benefited by a pre-existing erosion constructor and they're voluntarily removing it. I think it's important to recognize that reconstructing that retaining wall would be prohibited. And as I've mentioned before, the purpose of that retaining wall was to hold up a pool that's closer to the harbor than any pool on the harbor. If you're eliminating that swimming pool, that retaining wall serves no functional purpose and absolutely should have been removed. And it really should have been removed from the onset of the application. John, it's a shame that John felt that he couldn't characterize the benefits of this application without insulting me. He attributes a few denials and the results of litigation to recommendations by me personally, not even the planning department, mentioning Britis and Davis and Schumacher. That's insulting to pretty much this board and all of the predecessors that sat in the seats before you. Zoning boards across the country are a board of square pegs and round holes. You get stuff that doesn't fit together. You don't get to do like the planning board does and make a jigsaw puzzle and fit pieces together. You deal with stuff that's non-conforming. And this board has a huge volume. It has for my entire tenure with the town. Zoning board members put as much time into reviewing applications and making decisions on them as probably any community service oriented board in town here. And to suggest that, what I say is what you do is disrespectful to the members of the community that serve this board. And it's disrespectful to the legal counsel that you've always had sitting there to advise you on legal matters. I'm a biologist by education and an environmental professional. Your attorneys provide you your legal advice. John was one of those attorneys for a brief time 20 years ago. I don't know how many denials he wrote when he was the zoning board counsel, but to suggest that those denials all came because one person said to deny him and 5 intelligent adults that are put up there to represent the community couldn't make that decision or wouldn't come to that conclusion on their own is shameful. He's characterized 4 applications here to my recommendations on applications I didn't review in Runnymede, Water's Edge, Hare, and Zedlovich. It's funny, his own comments on Schumacher undermine his argument on Kaufman because he's mentioning the fact that I don't know if this is accurate because again, this only came in on Friday afternoon. But he summarized that reducing the house size on Schumacher wouldn't have resulted in a better wetland setback, and that was part of the judge's findings. That's not true in Kaufman here. Obviously, a different design residence with smaller GFA and a more condensed footprint would absolutely meet a better wetland setback than what's there now. Lastly, I got to point out that John mentions 8 applications here that he has referencing. He didn't provide the decisions. He didn't provide the name of the application. He didn't provide the tax map number. He only provided a brief little bullet. And whether that's out of laziness or out of a strategic tact, only John can tell you the truth. But what really matters here is how many of these 8 applications involved redevelopments. He mentions there are no dates, so some of these could be 20 years old like Schumacher or older. But it's really disrespectful to the board to sandbag this the Friday before the hearing without at least, the courtesy of providing the decisions in full. And I'll tell you something that I've learned over the years here before. When attorneys want you to know what something says, they submit it more than Friday before that. If there was a real good comparable in here, John would want, any good attorney would want you to look at that decision, look at that survey. And if you're going to compare applications, that's the right way to compare an application. You look at it holistically. You look at the size of the property, the location of where the structures are, the depth of the property, where the wetlands are, what mitigation is being offered. Did some of these applications also include revegetations? Did they involve scenic easements? I imagine some would, but with just a brief little bullet like that, it's a disservice to the application and everybody who's put time into it.
How much longer, Brian?
I think that's it. I could bring up the revegetation plan, but the revegetation shouldn't have these large grassy meadows. It shouldn't have
But do we have an accurate plan? Like the survey doesn't depict what's happening with the restoration of the coastline
yes.
and the removal of the retaining wall. It doesn't address whether there's going to be a buffer or even a conservation easement.
Well, no conservation has been offered. It won't come into compliance with the 50-foot setback for clearing of vegetation because the structures are located less than 40 feet away. I can, they're all in the combined plans here. I can scroll down, whoops, oh goodness. I can scroll down to the revegetation plan. These are the elevations. Again, you can see how, the way the building is stepped, this is just not something that's condensed for a constrained property. It's whether you want to use the adjective sprawling, aggressive, grand. This is the revegetation. It's in the combined plans that were dated.
Right.
They're dated May 31st, but they were submitted last week. There are plants on here like bearberry that grow out in the dunes. There's no bearberry on Oyster Shores Road. I don't know why that. Anyway, large grassy areas are not an appropriate revegetation for the shoreline of 3 Mile Harbor. The plan is poor. The real vision for this property, I think, is reflected in one of the architect's cover sheets. It's in there, and it shows the house with a big lawn and the retaining wall being retained, and lawn down to the water. Exactly what John was saying is part of the problem with this area in the first place. So, to call what's there 100% better. don't know where John says harbor protection discourages changing topography. Maybe he's right. I'll check the regulations, but I don't recall that being in there. But anyway, the bottom line is the most conforming locations on this property need to be used efficiently. That doesn't mean the whole house has to be jammed up to the 15-foot setback line. The scale of the development needs to be reduced. The total footprint of the project, meaning the house, the appurtenances, the pool, and the deck need to be consolidated or condensed to better fit the constraints of the property. And even with that, there's no way to redevelop this lot without wetland setback variances. And I want to be clear in case there's a lack of understanding somewhere that the planning department is not, set on objecting to any variances on this lot. That would be irrational. What would be rational and what would be consistent with the zoning code is maximizing the setbacks to the protected natural features and making the development on this property more commensurate with its constraints. And that is what will protect the character of 3 Mile Harbor and Oyster Shores Road. A number of properties have come in for redevelopments. There have been a number of sanitary system upgrades. The idea that all the cesspools are sitting along the shoreline and groundwater is not true. I know that for a fact, even without looking at the records from there, just from the applications that I've seen come before this board over the year. And other properties will come in too, because even any larger house, any more modern house is a greater asset to any applicant than old small development that's near the shoreline now. So the applicant can get the benefit of new construction, a newer house, a larger house, without these magnitudes of variances and without this very large footprint on a constrained property. And that is it.
Thank you. Any questions for Brian?
I don't have questions.
No.
Go ahead, John.
So the planning department spoke for 25 minutes. Lots of shots.
I grant you some time.
Lots of shots at me, including lazy and sloppy. I'm not going to address all the comments unless you specifically have any concerns. Like a lot of that was a lot of the planning department's comments were that I was somehow misleading the board or not being truthful. If you have any concerns, I'm happy to address them. Otherwise, I'll just say that I don't think I did. I'll address 2 off the top of my head though quickly. It's something I've disagreed with the planning department over the years many times, but when you look at the harbor protection overlay or the setbacks for sanitary systems, for vacant land, it's 200 feet, but it says if you have to replace your septic system for an addition or a new construction, then it's the most practical. It doesn't say 200 feet. And it's not the first time we disagreed on that, but that's why I say that. Tidal wetland setbacks, just so the board knows, all the local surveyors got together because they're inherently super unreliable. Like, where is the mean high tide? It depends. I think the only way to do it would be go out for a full year. Anyway, so the local surveyors have gotten together, and if the planning department or the board doesn't like the way they're doing it, it would be good. But they're basing it on surveying principles, and what they've decided is that the 1 foot contour should be a uniform. And actually, like I think Walbridge is using 0.8 inches. So Saskis is using a foot. I think Hemmer is using 1.2. So they have come up on their, and this is from Dave Saskis telling me this. They've come up with their own way that is at least consistent. Otherwise, you're making a line up because mean high water is notoriously hard to locate. So that's some of the reasons why. But Brian gave a very impassioned, almost legally lawyer-like lecture on why the application should be denied, but he never once analyzed, as the chief environmental analyst for the town, whether this would be better or worse for 3 Mile Harbor. We're not here for a pyramid variance, a height variance, a GFA variance, a coverage variance. We easily comply with all those standards, including even after the town makes you take the tidal wetlands out of your lot area. We still meet all those things.
But he did state that's your burden of the proof, though, to prove whether it is or not, right?
Well, there's other than to numerically point out to you that a septic system is sitting 19 feet from the wetland, and we're going to move it to 125 feet. I can't do much more than prove. I think when I say we're going to give 8,000 square feet of vegetation, where a pool and a septic system and a lawn exists now, and you question the quality of the, it's still not lawn, right?
But I think we as a board would be remiss in saying that, okay, if we start, I mean, we have to look at this, I'm saying.
Yeah.
And saying if this, and that's why I go back to my question, a little bit bigger, or how much bigger is allowable and what we do. What's the accumulative effect on this on an entire shoreline of 3 Mile Harbor? There is a cumulative effect that I think as a board, if we don't take that into consideration,
Yeah.
we would be remiss, I think.
No, I think that's what I'm asking. I'm asking you to look at the application and say, hey, would I rather see this if I'm sailing, swimming, or walking in front of the house? And objectively, you can't say otherwise. It's way better we're not before the board for aesthetic review or for any dimensional variances. We're here for tidal wetland variance. And the only, it's detriment versus benefit, right? There is no detriment. Planning department has not.
But I don't think
it could be smaller.
But I don't think the nexus for us looking at it should be whether I want to swim there or not.
That should be a question, right?
Is that a nexus?
Well, I think, I'll make sure I understand you correctly. I think I say that if you're looking at whether someone should get a tidal wetland variance or not, it's about water quality, right? We want to protect the water quality of 3 Mile Harbor. So right now, I honestly wouldn't want to swim in front of this property. Would I swim in front of it after it was built? Yeah, I would, right? Because you're not going to have the septic system. You're not going to have the any fertilizers. So it's a significantly better project. A couple things I want to point out is that the trustees protect 3 Mile Harbor, and we notified them, and they have no objection. Now, maybe they never object, but they're there theoretically as our water neighbor to protect 3 Mile Harbor, and they're not here objecting to this application. We did notify them. Right? You can call it whatever you want, but getting rid of that erosion control structure, whatever it's called, whatever the term you want to give it, I use it because it is holding back the soil and preventing the water from taking the soil away. So whatever that is.
It's obvious it's part and parcel of the pool structure.
Right. But we've had multiple emergency permits over the years to replace it after it was damaged by storms. So it's serving some sort of function there. Getting rid of that and restoring the natural shoreline should be a home run. Again, the planning department spent a lot of effort objecting to the application. It essentially came down to attacks against me and that it was too big. And I think that they should spend more time looking at whether there's a net benefit or a net detriment to but we're only here for a wetland variance. And those cases I point out, they're right on point, right? More frequently lately, the judges in Riverhead have been saying that if you meet the standards, you should be given the permit.
John, let me ask you something. How does a 60-foot and 66-foot request for a variance for a swimming pool and pool patio meet the standard for a natural resource special permit and variances? I'm trying to wrap my head around.
Okay, so
your thinking.
For variance purposes, it would not if that were vacant land. But when you have a pool that's sitting in 3 Mile Harbor and you're saying, hey, I want a variance to move it further away, to triple its distance, then I think it meets the standards. I think you would agree with me that you would rather keep the pool.
No.
Okay.
What I'm saying is it's quite possible, but the constraints of this property, a swimming pool is an amenity.
It's there though, right?
It's there,
right.
But the variance that you're asking for is substantial.
So you would expect someone to
Very
rebuild a house and get rid of the.
I just don't know how I can wrap my head around the fact that this meets the standards when I go through them one by one.
Okay, is it substantial? A substantial variance is something that is likely to hurt the protected natural feature, right? So if it's convenient, they'll throw the numerical at you, but there's plenty of case law that says it's not just a numerical balance. You don't just look at the number and say, ooh, a 59-foot variance is okay, but a 60-foot variance is bad. You have to look beyond the straight up numbers. And in this case, it's not substantial because we're tripling the distance. We're making things 3 times better, right? Like that's not a substantial variance, right? I hope you're following that. I can't tell, but
I'm following.
you're
John.
saying, hey, it's a big
Not
variance,
agreeing,
and I'm
but I'm
saying,
following you.
so you're saying, hey, that's a substantial variance, and I would agree that numerically it might seem like a big variance, but you have to look at the application. And if the applicant's before you saying, hey, I'm sitting here and I want to get further away, that's not a substantial variance. It's not. It shouldn't even be something I have to argue about. And then, but the most important when you're looking at does meet the character neighborhood, like we all agree that's a very hard standard to apply, but it does meet all dimensional variance setbacks. But over and over again, when you read the case law on these things, they say, hey, look, if you're looking for an environmental variance, not a side yard, not a height, not a GFA, but environmental benefit, the question is, are you going to make, what the planning department should be focusing on and directing the board to look at is how is this going to impact the natural feature? Like, let's not try to say your house is too big or too small. Let's say, will we hurt 3 Mile Harbor if we approve this? And I think we have made the case that not only will we not hurt it, will significantly improve upon the water quality in 3 Mile Harbor.
John, to me, you're offering up, the application's offering up some improvements. I have no doubt about that. And I think that the question I sort of have is that a lot of people come in front of us, applicants come in front of us, and they've worked for a considerable amount of time with the planning department back and forth. There's a lot of give and take on this, suggestions on planting plans, re-veg plans, suggestions on how you might improve it. It seems to me a shame that what is essentially an effort to offer up some environmental improvement is hung up on what has become personal. And also there's a certain distance here between two people or two different groups here, you and then the planning department, trying to work out what are the suggestions that are coming from the planning department that might be applicable, and what are the concessions they might be willing to make based on your offer. So this one is a difficult. I don't know if it's going to be a difficult problem, but what it is it offers some difficult questions for us. And there is definitely an improvement in getting an IA system. There's definitely improvement in moving it back. The question isn't whether or not there's an effort being made here to do something that's a positive. The question is whether or not it might have been a better positive for all concerned had a little more coordination taken place.
I think you're always going to run up against that problem. Could it have been better? I understand that thought process. I still think, though, that if you're guided by the principle of, hey, okay, in this case it's 3 Mile Harbor, will this be better for 3 Mile Harbor? That it becomes a pretty easy. And I would agree with you that it would be. We all would like to have, the TAM. You can submit an application and 10 months to a year later. I mean, I hired Jim Grimes, Fort Pond Native Plants, to do the revegetation. He's considered to be very good at it. I know in the past, the planning department has, they're all native plants, right? We were trying to remove a lawn and put in native plants. Planning department doesn't like some of the plants.
That's a good example, though, where quality people are involved in the project. I've been part of projects. People get together and they work out some of those give and takes. There's going to be concessions on both sides.
Yeah.
Here, we're at a hard point where there's some obviously strong feelings on both sides. And I question why this couldn't have gone a little smoother for the applicant and yourself had this been a better negotiation along the way. Because there definitely is room for some give and takes here that would make it more palatable for both sides.
I understand. That would be fabulous if we had that relationship, but I don't have that relationship with the planning department. I find that it's very difficult to, when you start out being opposed to projects like this, it's hard to find middle ground. I wish there was, but we propose native plants, and the board would be free to condition any approval on removal of whatever plant is offensive.
But there's, even if we haven't even gotten into the meat of even the design of the house or something, but if you look at the survey, there's a fair amount of proposed gravel walkway and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And is that necessary? All these things are necessary. There's a large, seems like a large area donated to access to the crawl space. Is that necessary? So there's a lot of things that,
we have 100% with the whole thing's lawn and non-native plants right now. And we're proposing to put back 8,000 square feet of vegetation. 50% of the property is what you need to comply with H5 regulations. So that's a pretty big mitigation.
Okay.
So my comment too, they are large variances for the pool, say, and these will go into perpetuity.
100%.
Once this is
Yeah.
granted, if it can't be improved upon, they'll be there forever.
As the current house will be with the current pool, right? So
You don't have to repeat.
you don't get it though. You don't get that.
We don't get it.
Well, you're saying that's a big variance. Numerically, it might be, but there's an existing
I
pool
heard
in
you.
front of it.
I heard you.
That's
Read your
okay.
memo.
So yeah, I'm never going to convince you of that fact. I understand.
All right, I don't have
All
any
right.
questions.
Is there anybody in the public that would like to address this application? Anybody in the public? John, there's some information that we don't have, like we need an updated survey and we should have a construction protocol for removing that pool, restoring the beach area.
Can I just ask that you wait to see if you're going to approve it or not, and if you approve it, conditioning approval
I
on
agree.
those things?
Okay. Okay. All right. Well, good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Therefore, I'll make a,
Excuse me, just 1 second. I just want to state for the record, we have 0 calls on the line. Thank you.
thank you, Matt. I want to make a motion in the application of Andrew Kaufman at 50 Oyster Shores Road, East Hampton, Suffolk Tax Map number 300-92-6-19, to close the hearing and the public record.
I'll second it.
I concur.
Thank you.
Don't concur?
All right, we're going to go into our work session.
I concur.
Guys, are you here for just to listen? Okay, great. We have a couple of administrative applications. First is Matthew and Lauren Johan at relation? No. At 298 Old Stone Highway in Springs, Suffolk Tax Map number 300-83-5-18.1. And the description is to construct a 514 square foot two-story addition and 657 square foot deck with 150 feet of freshwater wetlands.
So the wetlands are located across the street and the proposed addition. Can you see like my mouse moving around on the survey?
Yes.
Okay. So the wetlands are across the street and then the proposed addition is right here. And then the proposed deck is right next to it. And the addition is about 128 feet from those wetlands. There is a bin over here within side yard setbacks that I spoke to the owner and a condition of any permit would be that that's moved to a conforming location. He agreed to it. And then basically as far as mitigation for the project, we would recommend sediment control fencing. The property has this cottage back here, which was erected prior to zoning, so it's pre-existing non-conforming, and as well as the clearing is pre-existing non-conforming, 100% cleared.
Questions? Denise, you have any
I
concerns?
don't. I don't think I do.
Anybody have any concerns or?
I'm sorry, did you say the property is over clear?
It's pre-existing non-conforming, 100% cleared. There's a memo from Natural Resources about it.
That's hard. I'm just trying to get clear on where it is.
Old Stone Highway.
The addition is entirely on that one property. Yeah, okay.
Yes, it's this kind of hatched area right here. It's a two-story addition.
Yeah.
Are they offering any mitigation?
We could suggest any, they haven't offered any on the applicant's end.
Like a scenic easement or?
Where are the wetlands again?
Wetlands are across the street.
Across the street.
The wetlands on the opposite side of the house
Right.
from the addition.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, so I don't know if there's a
addition
next.
is-
Yeah, I don't
No,
know. That's what I mean. I
Yeah.
actually went and saw this site.
Yeah.
I was confused.
Okay. I mean, okay, I'm okay with it.
I'm okay with it.
I'm okay with it, too.
Thank you. We have a
Thank
motion?
you.
In the matter of the application of Matthew and Lauren Johann, 298 Old Stone Highway in Springs, Suffolk County Tax Map Number 300-83-5-18.1. I make a motion that it go administratively.
Second.
I concur.
I concur. Thank you. Next, we have applicant Fugazi at 80 Lost Point Road in Springs, Suffolk Tax Map Number 300-83-4-5, and that's to construct an approximately 133 square foot above-ground pool, 1,631 square foot deck, and 558 square foot of one-story addition within 150 foot of tidal wetlands.
So the tidal wetlands are across the street on this property. The proposed deck is about 110 feet from the wetlands, and that's the closest proposed structure to the wetlands. The pool is about 125 feet, and the proposed addition is about 125 feet as well. They are upgrading their sanitary, which is 206 feet from the wetlands. The house addition is proposed to contain living space and no additional bathrooms or bedrooms, but since the property is within harbor protection overlay, the sanitary upgrade is not voluntary, but it's still an improvement to the current sanitary system, which only consists of cesspools over here. Again, we would require sediment control fencing to be installed prior to construction, and that any pool water would be discharged into a dry well more than, at least 100 feet away from the wetlands. There is approximately 1,400 square feet of proposed clearing, which is mostly around the area of the proposed sanitary upgrade. That would still keep it under the maximum clearing allowed.
And the sanitary meets all other regulations.
Yes, yeah, I think the groundwater is about 11 feet down.
Do we just want to circle one
Said
more
that's not
time?
mitigation, though?
Street.
You said that's not mitigation, the IA system?
Well, it's not voluntary, it would be required because
Required.
they require natural resource special permit.
Just tell me again where the sanitary system is.
It's on the rear end of the house, so it's about 206 feet away from the wetlands.
Any questions?
No.
In the matter of the application of Fugazi, 80 Louse Point Road in Springs, Suffolk County Tax Map Number 300-83-4-5, I make a motion that the application be processed administratively.
I'll second.
Concur.
I'll concur.
I concur as well. Thank you. All right, we're going to post-hearing decisions. Jonathan and Linda Sawyer at 64 Squaw Road
Oh,
in
wait,
Springs.
is this,
Oh, wait a minute, Sim.
I think we have
Did I miss something?
Santoro?
No, that's it.
Is it
Oh,
just on mine?
No, I had it too.
No, it got taken
Santoro
off.
got removed.
yeah,
Okay.
go.
Sorry.
Jonathan and Linda Sawyer at 64 Squaw Road in Springs, Suffolk Tax Map Number 300-75-1-8, and the size and location is 14,135 square feet at 64 Squaw Road in Springs, Suffolk Tax, I read that. This description is to allow existing decking to be reconstructed as slate patio, a new spa equipment, relocated pool equipment, arbor over patio, walkways, relocated AC, outdoor shower, expanded driveway, and the clearing of beach vegetation to remain on a parcel of land containing tidal wetlands and beaches and within side yard lot line setbacks and outside of the town's pyramid regulation. The relief sought is a natural resources special permit. Pursuant to 255-420 of the town code, and 15 variances are required for this application. 6 variances of 49.5 feet, 43 feet, 17 feet, 13 feet, 6 feet, and 3 feet are required from 255-430 of the town code to allow the existing patio to remain 50.5 feet, spa 57 feet, arbor 83 feet, spa equipment 87 feet, AC unit 94 feet, an outdoor shower at 97 feet respectively from tidal wetlands where 100-foot setbacks are required. One variance of 20 feet is required from 255-430 of the town code to allow clearing 30 feet from tidal wetlands where a 50-foot setback is required. Three variances of 15.7 feet, 15.7 feet, and 9.2 feet are required from 255. 1110 of the town code to allow the existing spot to remain 4.3 feet, pool patio 4.3 feet, spa equipment 10.8 feet respectively. From the southern side yard lot line where 20-foot setbacks are required. One variance of 0.2 feet is required from 255-1110 of the town code to allow the existing pool equipment to remain 19.8 feet from the eastern rear yard lot line where 20-foot setback is required. Three variances of 3.7 feet, 3 feet, and 2.1 feet are required. 5 town code. This will allow the existing patio to remain at 8.3 feet, arbor 9 feet, AC unit 9.9 feet from side yard lot line setbacks where 12 feet setbacks are required. Finally, one variance of 7 inches is required to allow the existing arbor to remain 7 inches out of the town's pyramid regulations and any other relief necessary. The zoning district is a residence zone, next flood zone, and that is a mouthful. Go ahead, Denise, so I think you should start this off.
Yes. Okay, let me see my notes. This public hearing was held on May 16th, 2023. I was not present the night of the public hearing, but I have reviewed the public hearing tape and all the documents. This is a 14,135 square foot lot in a harbor protection overlay district. All of the existing structures are depicted on a Saskis survey. I think it's the one I'm looking at is dated last revised 10/4/2021. Yes. There are 15 variances being requested and a natural resource special permit is being requested as well. John Huber appeared on behalf of the application from Dayton, Voorhees, and Balsam. Tyler Borsak represented the planning department. There were no callers. So I'm going to go right into, and the one thing I want to point out is several of these structures were constructed or replaced without proper permitting. So they never really came before this board for review, and the structures were just built. This parcel is located within the Harbor Protection Overlay District, and since it abuts 3 Mile Harbor. So for the record, I'd like to talk about the importance of the Harbor Protection Overlay District. They're established to maintain and improve surface water quality in East Hampton's major harbors, which in this case is 3 Mile Harbor. Regulations help prevent the entry of stormwater runoff into 3 Mile Harbor and preserve important indigenous vegetation. Hampton Town waterways are among the town's most prized features, and they support shellfish, wildlife, and offer residents and visitors a place to swim, fish, hunt, boat, observe wildlife, and enjoy scenic beauty and tranquility. This overlay district.
Is somebody messing around with the microphones?
There you go.
Somebody started.
Okay.
We still have that.
This overlay district will help preserve the important benefits for future generations. And I might add, these are not my words. This language is directly from our East Hampton Town Code. The mass and scale of these structures, some of which were built without building permits, are not in keeping with the limiting development on their constrained parcels in order to protect natural vegetation buffers. Setbacks are created to limit environmental impacts, and without these mitigation measures, these structures before us tonight actually contribute to pollutant runoff into 3 Mile Harbor. This property was purchased after 2020. There was absolutely no thought given to this being a parcel with environmental constraints. So when I view an application like this, the first thing I think about is if they did come before us with proper review and we did have a public hearing, would I have approved it? The new spa, had it come before us, I would have never approved. A 43-foot variance is very non-conforming to both tidal wetlands and side yard setbacks. The spa is also located 4.3 feet from the southern side yard lot line where 20 is required. Also, in terms of the spa, there were alternative, more conforming locations that were never explored. So this really is not the minimum variance necessary. And had other options been explored, it could have better met NRSP standards. The stone patio, which replaced the existing decking on the seaward side of the house, is basically the same location as the deck that exists. It's not any closer to the wetland than what was previously there. However, it does extend further north, and that's the portion of the deck that I'm denying. The northern side of the patio does violate side yard lot line setbacks. I'm denying the request for a 3.7-foot variance for the existing patio to remain 8.3 feet on the northern side yard lot line where 12 is required. I'm also denying the
Excuse me, is that for the same standard reasons?
Yes.
Okay, just,
I'm also denying the arbor 17-foot variance where 100 is required, and a 3-foot variance for the arbor to remain 9 feet from the side yard where 12 feet is required. It definitely does. It's not the minimum variance necessary, and had they gone through proper review, more conforming locations could have been worked on. More thought should have been given to finding a more conforming location or reducing the size of the patio and arbor so no variances will be required. So these are not the minimum variances necessary, and there are alternatives that were never explored since we really, this wasn't really subject to any review. And why should we grant variances, especially when things were built without building permits and the decking that originally existed was adequate? The AC unit is a very minor, the unit is not closer to the wetlands than the actual residence. The existing walkways are minor. The outdoor shower should have a dry well to help with runoff. The driveway should not have significant impacts. Pool equipment, very minor variance. I'm denying the request for a 20-foot variance to allow clearing 30 feet from the wetlands where 50 feet is required. To request a variance of this magnitude is, in my opinion, not in keeping with the NRSP standards and is not in keeping with variance standards. Vegetation is a key component in regulating runoff. This is important to the water quality of 3 Mile Harbor. I also agree with the planning department that a scenic easement over the required buffer would protect that vegetation forever. I also agree with a revegetation plan covering an additional 5-foot buffer to the bluff crest should be submitted and approved by the board prior to the issuance of a building permit and implemented before a CO.
The board or the planning department?
To the board, approved by the board. That's what it says in the town.
so let's,
So,
AC unit, you're approving the walkway, you're approving shower and driveway and clearing is denied, right?
I'm denying the, I'm approving the existing patio, but denying the extension of the deck that goes further north.
That's correct.
And I'm denying the spa, I'm denying the arbor, I'm denying the spa equipment, yes to the AC unit, yes to the outdoor shower, I'm denying the 30-foot, the 20-foot variance for the clearing and the side yard. The 3 variances, the existing patio to remain 8 feet where 12 is required, the arbor to remain 9 feet where 12 is required. I'm denying those as well.
Okay. Who wants to go next? Terry?
I got my list. I think I agree with just about everything you said. Okay, well, we'll start with the spa. That clearly is a large variance and a denial for me. And that aside from the wetland variance, the spa has the south side yard variance of 4.3 feet. And as members have restated, there are alternative locations that were suggested in the TAM to improve the setbacks on that spa, to put it more between the swimming pool and the house. I am also denying the extension of the slate patio on the north side where they extended it out and put the arbor over it. So that 17-foot variance for the arbor and the side yard variance of it. And it's also the very slight pyramid variance on the arbor. It's like 7 inches, but the arbor overall and the patio on which it stands is a denial for me. Pool equipment. The outdoor shower, I'm also okay with the condition that they will add a dry well to it. The applicants had cleared, oh wait, let me wait on that one for a second. The pool equipment, that was 0.2, I'm okay with that. And the clearing 20 feet, I'm not approving that needs to be restored, the clearing area. And I believe the planner also recommended an additional 5-foot buffer along that. And I want to stipulate that that is necessary also. 49.5 for the pool patio, that's actually toward the seaside, seaward side of this, is pretty much, I believe it came out about 6 or 7 inches, different from the original wood patio decking that was there. So I am okay with that approval. Spa equipment. I am okay with that one.
Well, if you're denying the spa.
The spa, no, that's true. Okay, so I'm denying the spa equipment. That can move with the spa. I'm sorry. Outdoor shower, the pool equipment, the clearing. And
I think you did.
I think I did the walkways, that was, oh, I'm okay with that. The driveway also larger, but I'm okay with that also.
Okay, again, relating to the standards.
Well, some of the spa, well, most of this, the spa and the arbor and the patio to the north are all, spa is a pretty large variance, and there are alternative locations available for that, the spa and the spa equipment.
Yep.
And the arbor is, arbor and the patio was done, without a permit, and I think that might have been denied, had to come in front of us. They were already benefiting from, I believe it's a lower setback on the north side of the property, so.
4/10
give an
rule.
addition of 4/10 rule. So in addition to that, I don't want to give a further variance on it. The showers, just said, well, for environmental standards, the dry well for the shower, and again, because of the RSP standards for the reasons aside from the dimensional wetlands variance.
Sure. I think it's important that Member Savarese pointed out that we have to ask ourselves a question when we get these applications. If it came in front of us initially, what would we say? Pretty obviously, I think I'm in agreement with my fellow board members that the spa would not have been approved, nor would several other aspects of this application. I think that night it was proposed that the spa was a builder error and that there were some things that went on here that went beyond what the owner might normally care to do or approve. I'm not buying any of that. I'm particularly not interested in hearing every time someone comes in front of us with a massive ask that it was a builder error. Builder error is when we get something in front of us that's minimus and we see that somebody made a natural mistake. But this is a large structure that took planning and approvals and financing, and therefore the contention that it was a builder's error doesn't mean an awful lot to me. And I think that that's something that comes, we hear all the time. I just want to go back to that notion that when you look at this, we ask ourselves, what would we approve if it came in front of us? And when I go down, I'm largely in improvement with an approval with my fellow board members. I think that the spa is definitely for me a no, because it's too large a structure that we would not have moved in that direction. I think the extension of the patio, agreeing to allow for the patio that replaces the existing wood patio, that I'm in sync with that with my fellow board members. But I also agree that moving to the north and adding the arbor is something we should approve of at this time. I think that the AC, the driveway, the pool equipment, the shower with the dry well, and the small additional pool patio, I can approve. And I think the stipulation of the additional 5-foot buffer is important. On about the clearing, I don't see any way in which I want to approve that additional clearing here, so that's a no. Let's miss something here. Sure. I think we go back and ask ourselves on properties like this, what it is we're looking to achieve as a board, and what are we ruling on. I think it's important that we do not get too far down the road of approving those items if they come to us in the initial application. I think when we do that, it does provide a service for those who have, gone to great lengths to give us a legitimate application, asking us in front of the board for their approval. So with what I've said, if I missed anything, I'm pretty much in line. I'm pretty much in line with my fellow board members.
Joe?
I don't have much to add. It's pretty comprehensive. I think I'd like to emphasize that the spa would set a poor precedent for any similarly constrained property. And at this point has already been made, but I think it's worth making that there were alternative locations for it. And it's not a builder's error. It was, one place it was described as a 9x9, basically giant hot tub. I think it's hard to believe that that was built by mistake. I just wanted to add that with respect to the clearing, I think that the planning department can approve the revegetation plan as well as the proposed scenic easement. I don't think it needs to come back to the board for that.
I was just looking at language in the technical analysis.
No, I agree.
What did you repeat that again?
I don't think that they need to come back to the board for approval of the revegetation plan. I think that can be part of a condition.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
fine.
Oh, yeah,
That's
exactly.
And the other variances were minor. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
We have a long agenda tonight, so
I
I'm
know.
conscious of.
I too, I'm not going to add a lot to this. I just see applications like this. I think they're egregious. And it's sad that we get to these points where we do have strict guidelines, like member Savarese pointed out, the and there was no to even consider those. So
My goodness.
Intact.
that's nasty. I agree with each and every one of those. So I don't think it's, and for the same reasons that were laid out in the standards. So
So
Thank you.
are we go, they're going to correct the 5-foot in depth that they overcleared for the
Yes.
1997
Yes.
ZBA determination plus an additional 5-foot
Correct.
buffer?
Plus an additional.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
John, you okay with that? Okay, great, thank you. We next have Shaggy Shag LLC at 774 Montauk Highway, Montauk, Suffolk Tax Map number 300-49-4-5. Size of location is 2,681 square feet at 774 Montauk Highway, Montauk, map number 174, Fort Pond Business, Section 1, Block 17, Lot 3, Montauk. The description is an appeal of the building inspector's determination dated September 5th, 2022 regarding the use of the existing restaurant. Applicants seek to reverse the building inspector's determination that the restaurant is being operated in a manner that would change the use definition to a nightclub. An appeal of the building inspector's determination dated September 5th, 2022 is a relief sought, and the zoning district is CB Central Business. The zone flood zone and secret class is type 2. Who wants to start this off? Okay, Ed?
Okay, so this was a long, eventful hearing, particularly the second one. We had a hearing on this initial application that covering this topic took place on December 6, 2022. The second hearing, which is the one we're ruling on tonight, took place on May 16th, 2023. At the December hearing, this board concentrated on trying to decide whether or not Shagwan Tavern was currently operating as a nightclub, which would have established a change of use for the near century-old Montauk establishment. At the May hearing, from my point of view, the scope narrowed, and we were asked to decide whether or not the Shagwan has had a long history of operating as what would now be considered a nightclub since before the 1996 and 2007 town rulings that sought to define just what it takes to constitute an establishment as being a nightclub. 3 town officials, 12 members of the public, and 2 representatives of Shaggy Shag spoke at the hearing. We also received many letters of support for the Shagwan to be allowed to continue operating as they have been. Ann Glennon spoke on behalf of the town and stated that in her letter of March 30th, 2023, that there had been music and dancing historically at the Shagwan, but that she felt it was mostly for special events, and then when it occurred regularly, that it was confined to the bar area and did not take place in the larger dining room. David Brown, East Hampton Town Fire Marshal, testified that he had issued citations for overcrowding in July of 2022, and he cited the 1960 New York State Fire Code that stated that any establishment that allowed for the assemblage of more than 100 customers would be required to install a sprinkler system. David effectively cited his concern for the safety of those inside an overcrowded night spot in the event of fire or a general panic. John Torbett, on behalf of Shaggy Shag, argued that because the restaurant had had dancing that required the moving of chairs from the bar and dining room dating back to before the 1996 and 2007 ruling, that a 1957 ruling that stated that any pre-existing usage or activity in established business would still be allowed to continue, and therefore this would exempt the Shagwan from being classified at this time as having established a new non-conforming usage on the property. John argued that the 1984 ruling that bars could not have live music, the 1996 ruling that a bar cannot be a nightclub, and the 2007 ruling that prohibited a bar or restaurant from moving tables and chairs back to accommodate dancing did not apply to Shagwan because of the 1957 ruling. Primary questions that we were to consider in his mind, therefore, the primary questions he was in his mind, therefore, was whether or not more than just the bar area had been historically used for dancing, and whether or not all of the restaurant had been used that way. Kevin Cooper, Director of Ordinance Enforcement for the town of East Hampton, reiterated the town's great concern for the safety of the public when in overcrowded structures, and expressed his fear that a serious incident involving the public might easily occur under these circumstances. He also pointed out that dancing in a nightclub setting occurs Thursday through Sunday in Shagwan, and that a serious overcrowding occurs on those nights. 12 members of the public spoke on behalf of Shagwan, and although all testimonies were heartfelt, many did not address the principal issue concerning the exact nature of Shagwan's past use as a regular community dancing destination. There's never been a doubt about whether or not dancing has occurred in Shagwan. The question is whether that history of dancing could establish a pre-existing condition that might exempt Shagwan from being considered a nightclub, which by current East Hampton Town Code would create a change of usage. Of those who spoke, 3 contributors seemed particularly pertinent to me. Jason Behan, who currently manages Shagwan, testified that his greatest concern is for that of his patrons, and that he never willingly tries to fill the restaurant to beyond his capacity, although he readily admitted that he has been cited for that infraction in the past. He also stated that he would be willing to consider adding a fire retardant sprinkler system in the future. Particularly effective and to the point, I thought, was the testimony of Dan Stavola, who stated that as a bartender at Shagwan from 1979 to 1982, he regularly witnessed and took part in the moving and stacking of tables and chairs on weekend nights, and that dancing occurred on many of those occasions. And Sean Hewitt stated that one of his jobs as a young boy was to help clean up the dining area after those nights when dancing took place. He said those nights were a regular occurrence and were a major part of his childhood. There are also several letters of support that specifically noted that tables were moved and that dancing occurred regularly dating back more than 30 years. As has been mentioned before, and it's going to be mentioned, I'm sure, in everyone else's analysis, this was a great turnout by Montauk people who held a particular warm spot in their heart for the tavern and wanted to reminisce about what it meant. Much of that, again, as I said before, was heartfelt, but did not necessarily address the issue. The 3 public comments that I just cited before, Behan, Stavola, and Hewitt, I thought proved more effective to me in arguing that a regular series of events has occurred in the past that might establish a pre-existing condition that could exempt the Shagwan from being considered as having added a new usage. I thought that was more effective than any of the other testimony by all the other speakers and the applicant representatives. A lot of what went on here was a semantic dance about was it or was it not a regular dance spot? Was it not? How much usage was? A lot of citing of wedding receptions and annual parties. None of those really fit into us making a long-term decision about how does this place, what conditions existed previous to 1996 that would qualify this for continued and regular usage. Problem for me at this point, though, with this application is now that I agree that there is a precedent that dancing that required the removal of tables and chairs from the bar and dining room did occur historically in Shagwan, and that therefore a pre-existing condition exists that could legally exempt the establishment from being considered as having added a non-conforming usage. But in doing so, I lend tacit approval to Shagwan being allowed to operate as what we would now consider a nightclub on the evenings when they remove tables and chairs and fill their space with paying customers, none of whom can benefit from the safety measures that would be enforced if they were forced to comply with the regulations established by the town for other night spots and clubs. That's an aside because that's not what we're here to discuss. We're here to decide whether or not an exact precedent has been set in the past that would indicate that what's going on now has some history. If we are asked, has there been dancing of a sort that historically establishes the precedent that Shagwan has regularly been a crowded, popular night spot for dancing and socializing? I think that the answer is yes. But I can only say with a certain amount of trepidation that agreeing to overrule the principal building inspector's interpretation of town code in this circumstance, that I and others, if they agree with me, will bear a certain responsibility to those who choose, perhaps unwillingly, to gather at Shagwan in the future, not knowing that all that could be done to ensure their safety has been done. That's a speculation on my part, but in point of fact, at no point was the representation on behalf of Shagwan or anybody else who spoke ever acted as if they were willing to have Shagwan apply for and become considered a nightclub, in which case many more safety regulations will be put in place. However, again, that is an aside. in the end, I think that while safety should be our greatest concern for the patrons and we bear a certain responsibility, I do think that the testimony of the most recent meeting did convince me that there is a precedent that will allow for this to be considered a pre-existing condition.
Thank you. Joe?
Wow. What can I add? I think I'm very sympathetic to the enforcement challenges, but I think in fact, I think I questioned John Tarbett on this, it doesn't primarily, the evidence we had doesn't primarily show that the uses fit within a bar, a restaurant, or a nightclub. It's a mix, and the code talks about primarily this or primarily that. But the code is something that was created after these uses existed. So it's like they're square holes that you're trying to fit over round pegs. It doesn't work. So I'm primarily in agreement with Member Johan. I am troubled by the safety issues. I don't know that it's within our jurisdiction to say to the owner, please put in a sprinkler system. But I guess that would be a request. Otherwise, I'm in agreement with Member Johan.
Thank you.
So you're not upholding,
No,
you're not upholding the building inspector's
case,
interpretation?
You were going to have some clarification conversation after everybody goes, but as to what uses and all that, I think we need to have that conversation. But Terry, go ahead. I'll let you go.
I can, okay. I'm trying to be brief because we have a stack.
Oh, okay. Well, got a little slightly different view on this. Okay, I have, well, we know we had the hearing in December, and we reheard this on May 16th. The Ann Glennon testified back on that 3/30/23, she issued another interpretation, which I have here, and that it's in response after an extensive review in consultation with the fire marshal's office with regard to their inspections in relation to music and dancing at the above referenced locations, been determined there was music and dancing in the portion of the bar area that is further depicted in Exhibit A attached, which is some sketch of the dining room and the bar area of Shagwell. Restaurant in it, her determination with evidence from the chief fire marshal that the restaurant room was not affected or included in the area of dancing, with all the tables and chairs for the dining room remaining in place with sit-down dinner service being served every night to all patrons. The dancing did not occur without the restaurant use being active and patrons being served dinner accordingly. Dave Brown, the chief fire marshal, did testify that they were cited, that Shagwell was cited in the summer of 2022. They exceeded their occupancy limit. It was never cited for dancing. He was concerned about the safety concern of it for the New York State Fire and Safety Code, testifying that, you know, people normally, if they come into a place, they want to leave the place the same way they came in, and during an emergency, that this would create a dangerous situation. And we know there have been incidents in the past in other places where there have been some pretty big disasters when people could not get out of the location. He said he has seen the moving tables and chairs, but that he testified that it's been seen in the bar area only. And in the first permit they had back for Shagwong, the tables, it was in 1977, 33 to 38 dining room and 40 to 48 in the bar area. Um, and So the occupancy, if it's 100 people or greater, a sprinkler system is required, which Shagwong does not have. He testified in July that he saw them put tables outside. Well, bottom line is they exceeded the occupancy and they did get cited for the occupancy limit. The documentation that Ann Glennon has from the town, in that documentation, and I have to quote it because there is 1978, there was a building permit issued on December 8th, 1978 for the Shagwong, in which the owner had gone to the ZBA at the time in order to add add to the men's and ladies' room, an expansion of the men's and women's room on the main floor, and to add another bedroom on the living quarters on the second floor, where his family was living. At that time, there was a determination done. The Shagwong apparently was already exceeding their coverage limitations, but the zoning board at the time did approve the variance in order to modernize the bathrooms in the tavern and modify the apartment for the demands of his growing family. In the application for that, and there is no reference, the owner cited that his premises is a restaurant with a residence. No other mention of any other type of establishment. And back in 2016, there was an application for the current owners to the SLA, which states that the premises will have music. And the question, will premises have music? They say yes. If yes, check what it's applied. Then it says jukebox. It also checks live music. And they said, will the premises permit dancing? On their application, they say no. There's some other questions regarding that, topless entertainment, a manager, et cetera. And those are all negative responses. So I struggle with a lot of the evidence was anecdotal. As member Johan had mentioned, people came in and testified that they've been dancing there for years. But I do believe, and the town admits, that there has been prior dancing at the Shagwong. A lot of the documentation, some from 1951, a lot of this was dinners and dancing, whether it was for the Montauk's Fire Company, celebrating an anniversary at the Shagwong Tavern, a lot of events that were done, and none of them, they all operated under the guise of the restaurant. They were done with the restaurant. A lot of the advertisements that were submitted to us show that it was a dinner. It was a roast beef dinner and dancing. And so the method, the way they were cited in July of 2022, that was different. With the tables being removed from the restaurant, and people, Dave Brown, Kevin Cooper, thank you, the director of enforcement, that stated that if you were in there, they asked you to leave, and they emptied the restaurant out, and then other people came in for dancing. But it wasn't in conjunction with serving food in the restaurant. I am upholding the Glennon's decision. And, we recognize that there was dancing and the pre-existing dancing to operate as it had been, as it did in the past, and with a lot of documentation that we see was related to dinners and dancing and that type of thing. Even on a regular basis, if it was 2 or 3 times a week, it was associated with the restaurant being opened and serving food also. So I am upholding her decision, her determination on this.
Thank you. Denise?
Our determination tonight is not based on anything but whether or not we will or not uphold Ann Glennon's interpretation. We are here tonight to determine whether or not we agree with Ann Glennon's interpretation of the code in terms of this property's legal use. The building inspector does not base any interpretations on personal feelings. She reflects the paperwork, documentation, and what is stipulated in the code. The building inspector testified this has always been called a restaurant bar. No one has ever questioned this. The CO, which is dated back to 1996, states it's a restaurant bar. It was never classified as a nightclub, always a restaurant. So the building inspector has to go by the code and the paperwork that is documented in town records. And of course, she's also taking into consideration health and safety. Dave Brown, our chief fire marshal, he's been a fire marshal since 2004. He became chief fire marshal in 2011, testified that he never has cited this establishment for dancing or music. They came upon an overcrowded situation, over 200 people. He also testified that he has seen moving tables and chairs from the bar area, but he's never really seen them removed completely from the building, moved outside. Once you do that, the issue is you're increasing the occupancy, which becomes a dangerous situation. Some of his numbers dated back to 1977, I think, were the oldest. And in the bar area, there are 40 to 48 tables. So that in itself is a lot of people. And the tables are an additional, in the dining room, creates an additional 33 to 38 tables. Mr. Brown also noted that he has never before seen tables and chairs being moved out of the building, out of the center of the building, to fill this place up with so many people, and that's the danger of it. By allowing tables and chairs to be removed from the bar area, there is recognition of a pre-existing non-conforming use. However, charges are generated in this case from the expansion of that use. And when you expand into the center, moving tables and chairs outside, you are increasing the non-conforming condition. Mr. Cooper appeared, our Director of Ordinance, testifying that every Thursday, Friday, and Saturday night, they're moving the tables and chairs. 10 o'clock, the line starts and it becomes a nightclub. By midnight, it's packed. This is a safety issue, which is very, very dangerous. And we're very lucky nothing has happened at this point. At our first hearing, December 6, 2022, I agreed with the building inspector's assessment back then that it was consistent with calling it a restaurant use. And as Member Berger noted, in a 1978 application, a building permit was issued, filled out by James Hewitt. And yes, one of the questions on his application was existing use and occupancy, and they replied restaurant and home. Intended use and occupancy, he replied restaurant and home. Now, in Ann Glennon's letter dated September 5th, 2022, she referenced, I need my glasses for this one. She referenced section 153-120D, which is not actually a code section. It's really from legislative findings section of the 1996 code changes. But it does state that a bar or tavern cannot really be converted or expanded into a nightclub without getting all the necessary approvals. Also, in the ZBA determination that Member Berger referenced, which was filed with the town clerk October 31st, 1978, approval was given to expand the living quarters for Mr. Hewitt's wife and 3 children. They also received approval to expand the restaurant portion, noting they can put in a few tables to make the restaurant a little more spacious and to install new men's and ladies' rooms. The purpose of the expansion was connected to the restaurant use. In essence, the determination granted modernizing the bathrooms in the tavern and modifying the apartment and expanding the restaurant portion by allowing a few more tables to make the restaurant more spacious. In conclusion, I am going to uphold the building inspector's interpretation that all records within the town are consistent with the use being a restaurant with a bar. Any extension of removing dinner tables and seizing the sit-down food service would be an additional use under the town code in East Hampton, which this property does not have.
Thank you. I think there's many things brought up that start this way. During the hearing, I asked Mr. Tarbett many times, multiple times, what is he asking for? What is it? What are we being made to decide? And over again, he said, we just want to be recognized for dancing and music. And the issue was not whether they're a nightclub or not. And I think that's a crux of what our decision needs to be. I agree. I agree with Terry in the sense that in the historic nature of dancing and music at the Shagwong, which, by the way, it's indisputed that they're a restaurant and a bar. It's indisputed that there's dancing and music.
And that's the use they have.
Right?
Right.
I agree with her assessment that when that was done, it was done consistent with being a restaurant and a bar, meaning that in no way were they acting as a nightclub, removing people and not having servings at the table, which is clear in the town code. So I agree with that. I think if we're being asked to simply decide whether or not dancing and music have existed there, I indisputably have to agree. I think the evidence is overwhelming. I think that even though Ms. Dave Brown said that, I also agree that at no circumstances should they be removing tables and chairs outside the building, because I think that this is an occupancy issue. However, the occupancy issue is two-phase. In a nightclub, the occupancy is defined as anything over 100 requires suppression. In a restaurant, it does not do that. I think Ann Glennon's second response is flawed in the sense in the paragraph, and I'm going to read it, is that the fire marshal indicated that if they saw the removal of table and chairs, such would be a violation of multiple provisions of the town code. It would have been impossible for the removal of all or portion of the tables and chairs in the restaurant dining room, as this would allow a larger occupancy within the facility, and such would require upgrade of fire suppression system. That's not accurate, because as a restaurant and bar, they're allowed an occupancy greater than 100. So it's not, I don't think it's accurate in what she's saying. So I think that's flawed. So simply saying that, agreeing that, or saying that, I don't think she's all wrong either, because she finishes off, all records in the town are consistent with the use being a restaurant with a bar, agreed. Any extension of removing dining tables and ceasing of the sit-down food service would be additional use under the East Hampton Town Code. Now, she also talks about the sitting down as a table. Where is that? Right?
Yes.
Yeah, so that's what I was going to refer to. So, and the other thing I'm having a hard time drawing or coming to a conclusion is whether or not had just a bar area or both or either or. I have a hard time drawing the conclusion that it was just at a bar area, because if you're holding a wedding, I think there was evidence and stuff that if there were weddings and events there, that you almost had to include the whole thing. So I have a hard time drawing that conclusion as well. So bottom line, I don't think I could uphold her interpretation, but also in no sense, and I think I'll speak for everybody on this board, in no sense are they permitted or shall they be permitted to operate as a nightclub.
So, well,
I mean, I'm okay
Let's
with the
talk about that.
dancing and the way they had done it traditionally, based on a lot of
In
the
the bar
documents that we have.
right.
Whether it's the whole, kind of.
So what do you,
As long as it's done in conjunction with their approved uses.
so are we saying,
Yeah, it's.
I just want to be
Well,
clear.
we don't always have to agree.
No, but we do
No, I know.
have to talk about it.
We should talk about it.
Because they have established the fact that there is recognition of the pre-existing
Right.
non-conforming use in the bar area. That's always happened. The problem started when they started in 2022, recently,
Well, that's when they got cited
emptying
for
out the
over-
tables and
over-
chairs
Which is
and
clearly acting as a nightclub
which
to me.
is acting as a nightclub.
Yeah.
So I have no problem letting them continue, just my own opinion, to do what they've always done. For me, when you expand it into the center of the restaurant, moving tables and chairs outside, you're increasing the non-conforming condition. I don't have any problem with them continuing to do what they've always done in the bar area. And they also, they can always get all kinds of necessary approvals if they want to expand to be a nightclub. I mean, they just have to go about it procedurally correct, in
And
the
I also-
correct way.
I would also say, and I think I speak for all of us, and even they said it in the hearing, that life safety is of paramount importance.
Absolutely.
Right? So life safety is important. The clickers, the counting, the
Yes.
occupancy, at no point should they even exceed their occupancy. These are all important and obligations. So go ahead, like you were going to say
No,
something.
I'm just saying.
I wanna just-
agree that there
I
was
just want to tell you how,
pre-existing dancing and music in conjunction with the use of the restaurant.
I tell you, I voted again, I voted in favor of upholding Ann's decision on the first time round, but I cited it in what I said tonight, but I'll just reiterate for a minute, and that is that if you were to ask me if this is operating as a nightclub, I would say yes. But what was proposed the last time we had a hearing here was, is there a history that the entire restaurant was used as a dance hall? And I was not convinced, along with anyone else, that any of the anecdotal information that came our way about wedding receptions or any of these other events, 4th of July parties, mean anything, because they're anecdotal and they are single individual events. But what did make me reconsider my position was the fact Kenny Stavola, as I cited, said he worked there for 3 years and they regularly took the tables and chairs, stacked them up, put them outside, had these regular dances. That's one testimony. John, you had said that his entire
Did he say
childhood.
outside?
Didn't he say, yeah, I
He
don't
might
know.
not have said
I don't know
outside.
I don't
about
think
the
he said
outside.
outside.
No, he-
But he did say they stacked them up.
They
and
stacked
there's a
them up.
regular occurrence
I
in
don't
both
think he
parts
said
of the
outside,
thing.
so listen.
And then I think that there were several letters, Sarah Conway, Lynn Bloomfeld, they didn't cite them all, that said they regularly remember the fact of the entire restaurant being turned into this dance thing on a regular basis. That, to me, establishes that there is a precedent before all of this. Now, we want to come back and talk about its current use and safety. I'm going to be appalled that this is going to go on without us being able to do anything controlling it. But if we're going to look at a narrow decision, and that's what I did, the narrow decision for me was, is there a legal, or not illegal, but is there a precedent that established the fact that there was a usage in this establishment that reflects the usage that's going on now, not to the magnitude of now, but establishes that there was similar? Then I said yes, and I thought that I would be willing to overturn Ann's decision based on the fact that what we heard at the second hearing, certainly not the first, was much more convincing. And it's because of these outside testimony of people who admittedly have been around for 30 and 40 and 50 years in town and knew what it was about. Again, I think a lot of the things that got thrown around early on were a combination of anecdotal information or semantics of, is it this, is it that? Yeah, if we had to define this and all of us wrote that definition, it's operating as a nightclub when you clear out tables and you charge a cover or an admission charge, and then you have to click how many are coming.
So that's where I'm confused. If you're going to uphold Ann Glennon's interpretation, you're admitting it's a nightclub,
No,
but it's being used as a nightclub.
But I think that there was John Tarbert introduced the 1957 ruling that said any establishment that has a previous activity can maintain that activity and not be subject to future zoning restrictions. That is an eraser for a lot of what came later. It may not be right, and I'm not happy with it, but if I'm asked whether or not that 1957 decision and the kinds of behavior that took place in the place does provide us with a precedent that says it has been used in a somewhat similar fashion to today, then I have to say yes. So that's how I reached my agreement, my decision.
In overturning the decision, let me think this through.
Maybe council.
You have no issues, because this is what's going to happen, with them continuing to operate the way they have
No, we
been.
do.
No,
I think we have the
Well,
restriction.
how are you
I think-
going
I
to-
think what,
This is just simply to say yes or no to Ann's interpretation.
No, well,
Well,
there's
yes.
relief. No, let's hear Joan go and then.
well,
we
I
can debate
think
this.
going back to what I initially said in a more truncated way is that they established that the activities they engaged in back in 57 were a little bit like a nightclub, a little bit like a bar, and a little bit like a restaurant, but not primarily any one thing. Today, looking at it through the lens of the code, it's easy to say, oh, when they move the tables and chairs and they're charging us, they're using clickers and they're charging an entrance code, they're operating like a nightclub. But that's through the lens of today, not the lens of 1957 and before.
But don't we have to look at today in terms of safety and fire and panic?
But
and
our-
what if
That's the
something happened?
occupancy laws.
That's the occupancy
That's
laws.
the occupancy
And
laws.
I mean, where if
they
this
have
is
to me, they have a pre-existing constitutionally protected right to these uses by reason of the 57 law.
but they,
I don't
when they
necessarily
move-
like the safety
Yeah,
implications.
well, that's there.
And it's a concern, and maybe as part of the decision, we make a recommendation to the town board that, non-conforming places should notwithstanding the fact they have non-conforming pre-existing uses, should still have sprinkler systems. And maybe that would resolve the safety issue.
I am not convinced that. I saw a lot of evidence that back in 1957, they were acting as a nightclub.
I'm not sure about 1957,
No.
but I'm willing,
Well,
but I'm.
Joan said
okay.
1957.
Oh, I know, but you were talking about 1957 ruling. I think that there was evidence presented under oath that these activities took place in the 70s. and that does predate money-related decisions. Look, first time around, I asked myself, is this a nightclub? And by the definition of the 96 ruling and by the interpretation by the building inspector, it was. I think that this time around, it was a narrower question than we were asked. And because it's a narrower question, what has taken place during, for example, David Brown, what he's witnessed and hasn't witnessed, really not pertinent. It's pertinent to the safety issue, but it's not pertinent to whether or not there is a long-term established usage of this that is similar to that of a nightclub. And that's how it's my decision.
Well, I respect how everyone feels, but I'm going to continue to uphold the interpretation because when the tables and chairs are removed from an area by the bar, it's a recognition of a pre-existing non-conforming use. But once you start to expand into the center, moving tables and chairs outside, you have increased the non-conforming condition and you have expanded a use that you don't legally have. So I'm going to uphold the building inspector's interpretation based on use.
I think that from any evidence that we had in the hearing and everything, the moving of the tables outside was one event that we had. We didn't have multiple or other. I would say that the decision, in my view, would be that they always had dancing, they always moving tables. The 2007 code that pre-existed the 2007 definition of restaurant and bar. However, they are not a nightclub.
Right.
And they cannot cease sit-down food service and operate as a nightclub.
But they are.
Go ahead.
I mean, the town records, they are a restaurant and a residence. I don't know, council, somebody.
Hey, John, you want to?
My concern is I am not here to give them a use, an additional use.
Yeah, and that's what we're
And I
doing.
don't see
Which I
where-
agree with.
Yeah.
I agree with that.
And that's my point.
Are a majority of you saying that they have to continue food service if they're having dancing?
I'm sorry, John.
I said, it
That-
sounds like the majority of you are
That's what I
saying you have to
received.
continue food service regardless, if you have dancing, doesn't preclude having the dancing or even moving the tables
That's
inside the
a
building.
restaurant, yeah.
But
But you
if
have to be food
if you
service.
follow the timeline here with,
Right.
with Tarbit's letter to Glennon, he wasn't asking her to make a determination on nightclub.
Right.
He was asking her to make a determination
Dance.
of whether or not dancing existed prior to 2007 definition. That's what he essentially asked her. She brought in the use of the nightclub. And I think we're brought back to I believe, and that's why I asked many times that night, what are we asking for? And simply the answer came back, did we have dancing and prior? And I say the
restaurant
answer
is.
is
With the restaurant.
emphatically yes.
At the shadow, prior
Yeah,
to.
I mean, you're talking about,
We all agree, they did, yes.
So John, what are you saying?
Yeah, so
We
well, I'm
can
saying that the differentiation
put in
between the
front of
two,
the bar dancing, but not take tables and chairs outside in the dining room for dancing and music.
I don't think we were asked that.
I don't think we were asked that.
well, I think you have to think about, you as the board can
Saying that's
interpret
okay
the
to
use
do,
that's
but they're
there
not
at that.
calling themselves a nightclub.
Right, regardless of what he asked. I mean, you can't say, I only want to look at this little part, don't you guys look at the rest of it? I mean, you have the information in front of you, you can make that decision. I'm hearing from some people that some feel it's a nightclub, which means there's no sale of food, it's just drinks and dancing. Some feel it's in conjunction with a restaurant use. I
But,
think that's a majority of the board, but I'm not sure on that.
but it functions as a restaurant and a bar, and then at a certain point in the evening, 10 o'clock, they have dancing and music.
Right,
And I think
No
that's,
food service.
but you better be able to order food.
They can't.
Well, now
can't
you've
cease
eliminated
being
the
a
restaurant use.
At that point.
Right,
So
because that's their use,
that's
is
the
a
issue, I
restaurant.
think.
Right,
But-
that is the issue.
but The evidence was that they stopped functioning as a restaurant at that point in time.
Well, I'd say
I
they're not
wasn't at
allowed
the
to do
hearing, I
that.
haven't seen this information.
Yeah,
So
that's
going
just-
back to the time that this became a pre-existing, became a non-conforming use, they would cease serving food and have dancing,
Yes,
Till
At
2 in
10
the morning?
o'clock, they empty out everything
yes.
and no more food.
and you're satisfied as a board that they've done that sufficiently to not show an abandonment of that use?
I don't think we have sufficient evidence to say that they did that on a regular basis prior.
Right,
If they had a banquet, a wedding, there was food service or whatever, it was an event.
yeah.
And they still
mean,
can do
Today,
that.
that would be a special event.
Right.
Right.
I mean, even all the documentation we
Of
have.
course,
you
they
know, somebody's
pre-existed
wedding,
zoning.
you know, the fire department's dinner dance,
Right.
roast beef dinner and dancing.
I agree with Terry's assessment
Those
on
would be
this.
special events.
I
Absolutely.
fully agree with her assessment on this.
So is that our decision? Like, yes, they had dancing previously in conjunction with the restaurant?
Seems like all of you agree that there was dancing there before.
In the bar area, yeah.
Some in the bar, others are not sure if it may be.
Mhm.
Well, I think that may have expanded to the
I think,
other part of the restaurant. They couldn't take baguettes out. They got baguettes
think that-
too. You know?
if, I don't know if I right by saying this or not, but they are a restaurant and bar. They are to continue being a
C of
restaurant and
O is a
bar.
restaurant.
And they are continued to be a restaurant and bar with music and dancing at times.
Okay.
That's it. They're not a nightclub.
In the bar area?
I just want to say, I
You
think
know,
we're
is
getting,
it just the bar area?
I think we're getting hung up on trying to decide whether or not we can define it as a nightclub. I will say again that even though I'm willing to overturn the ruling, I believe it's functioning as a nightclub. I don't think that's
See,
what
that's
we've
where
been
I'm
asked.
confused with
I
your
think what we've been
ruling.
asked is there a history?
Yeah, that's my
Does the
confusion right
history
there.
predate the 96 and 2007 rulings? And that history, in my mind, exists that both portions of the building were used and that we had testimony from several sources that convinced me that I was not aware of it. I live in Montauk 40-some years. I was not aware that that took place as extensively as it was. But I think that the testimony said to me that, yes, this is what happened. Now, we can go on and on about whether or not it's a nightclub. And we all here are very concerned about the implications for safety for the public.
But we're
And I
not
said
being
that.
asked that
That's what I'm
question.
saying. We're not being asked that question. So I'm not an attorney. I'm saying that my focus became, can they make the case that this activity took place regularly enough and in a similar enough fashion to say that happened before, that's similar enough fashion to what they have today. And I would say, although it's probably vastly different in terms of numbers, they can make that case. Am I happy with the safety implications? Absolutely not.
No, but the safety trumps anything. You can't
But,
predate safeties.
but safety isn't part of our jurisdiction.
Occupancy, yes, it is. If you're saying they're operating as a nightclub that has 100-seat
Yes,
capacity,
this is my point.
it has
I'm saying.
100-person capacity, which requires thing. The restaurant bar, they have an occupancy much greater than
Well,
that.
then maybe you want to say
They're
to
not a
to
nightclub.
the extent that this pre-existing use now reflects what is defined as a nightclub use, we request that they comply with nightclub safety regulations.
No,
No.
I don't agree with that because
No,
there
I
are
agree.
other restaurants that have music and dancing as well.
Mhm.
And I
And
think
that's the problem.
and in this town existing, and I'm saying that they cannot act or even simulate a nightclub. They're allowed to have dancing and music, but they can't simulate a nightclub
And when you say that, you're
That
saying they
means
can't
by
remove
the
the tables
definition of
and,
the town code.
so they can't remove the tables and chairs from the restaurant for the purposes of dancing, because then it increases the occupancy and it becomes a nightclub.
But there was evidence.
And then
that
there's a
they do
safety
that.
issue.
Wait, we know
There's
they
a-
were, okay. We know they were
referring to the
always
safety
pushing
requirement.
Me
aside the
too.
tables. Forget about putting them outside for the moment. They were always pushing them aside. So I'm even okay with that. They're pre-existing music and dancing. And
After
serving
hours.
dinner, then they would, do some dancing.
That's correct.
And that's it.
That's what I'm
And
trying
the
to say
C of
too.
O and the TAN, the use is a restaurant.
But you
with
are
the
increasing
residents,
occupancy with that, which does affect
and they
safety.
had to stay within that realm.
If they're primarily acting as a restaurant, then I don't think there is an issue. They can't go beyond their occupancy.
Well, that's regardless what they are. They can't go.
They can't
past their
charge for
occupancy.
cover. They can't stop food service.
But even as a restaurant, they can't exceed their occupancy.
the-
That's
but
fire and.
The
safety.
testimony was that they sometimes do charge a cover charge,
Which would make them a nightclub.
but that's through the lens of today and today's code, not the 70s and the 80s.
Do we really want to go back
We-
100 years and talk about why regulation and change has happened in this town?
Well, I
I
think
mean,
that's
really?
why I think as part of our decision, we can say we're constrained by the record, but we'd recommend that the board adopt a regulation to ensure that they adopt a sprinkler system and abide,
No, I don't think we should go there.
or
We have that authority.
we don't have that authority.
No, we don't, and we don't do these uses.
I'm with member Johan. I think we have a very limited question before us.
And I am too. So
Well, there you go. There we have
we
it.
have a 3-2 decision.
3-2, John.
So what's the
I
decision?
think I have.
What's the result of that
What is
decision?
exactly-
What's the result of that
What is,
decision?
what are they agreeing to? That's what I want to
Dancing
know.
and music within the restaurant while it's operating as a restaurant.
I'm fine with
That's what
that.
I'm understanding.
That's what I'm
Is that what
fine.
we're saying?
That's simple.
Okay.
No, because they stop operating
Well,
as
but
a
you don't agree.
restaurant
You're the two that
after
don't agree.
hours.
The
No,
three
wait,
of them
no.
Don't agree
It's
that
fine.
the evidence is
They were-
sufficient to
they were-
support your conclusion.
The three of
That's
you
what
are
I'm hearing.
overturning her decision. I think this isn't,
Right.
the whole decision isn't, the whole question that was asked and the decision responses.
Yeah.
Off.
I think the decision is flawed. Both of them are flawed. That's why there is a revision
The
to it. And even
interpretation,
the
you mean.
revision is a flawed decision.
Yep.
We can't either agree, accept, or deny them.
Right.
They're just both flawed.
Both of the building inspector
And I think our
interpretations.
board should say, this is where, you know,
Well, by way of a decision, yes. You know, obviously,
so I
we
don't
have to
think we can
agree
just
with the building
blanketly
inspector.
approve or disapprove them.
Are we in a position to have the authority to do more than that?
No,
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 this is an
No, I think-
appeal.
we're not here to add.
No, but I think,
Use
I
or
think our
anything else.
decision is, what we said is pre-existing operating as a restaurant that is recognized to have dancing and
music
Music.
Yes,
after
and-
hours. Period.
They didn't necessarily say after hours. They had parties in Montauk. That goes on all night. There is no after hours.
Yeah, after, they talked about how after service, they would
That's
have
what they,
at line 9 or 10 at night.
well, that's what they did in 2022. We're talking.
Yeah, but in the
Yes.
70s and the 80s, they had bands.
Yeah, for events, yes.
No,
And
not
live
special.
music, okay.
They
3
had
nights
live
a week,
music.
While,
yeah.
while the restaurant was open. They weren't.
No, after the restaurant, after service.
They weren't emptying, and no one said they were emptying out the restaurant.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
yeah, I agree with that.
Mhm.
And
So
as
we're
far as
not
cover
emptying
charge,
out
I
the
believe
restaurant.
the counsel for the applicant said he didn't know if they charge on
Right.
cover charge.
We're talking about the patrons at the restaurant and then replacing them with a group
That
of
was
just.
in the-
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Documentation.
So it's part of the amenity offered to the diners, even if it happens after hours, basically.
No,
I get
but
that.
they put in advertisements for bands that had covers.
When?
It
Where?
was in, I don't have the whole
I
record
didn't
in
see
front of me.
advertisement for a band with the cover. Well, I didn't bring it all with me tonight.
But I think maybe we just say that both times the question presented to us doesn't allow for an easy answer. And what we can say is they've established there was a pre-existing use as a bar and a restaurant with
With music and
Yeah,
dancing.
with
music and dancing.
Yes.
That I agree with.
Yes.
And maybe we just say period.
The
And
issue I have is in the restaurant. But I
No,
agree with the
no,
pre-existing
I
non-conforming use in
agree
the,
with, Vice Chair Johan on that. I think some of the testimony was that it expanded beyond that bar
but
area.
it wasn't legal to do that. They just
It
did
wasn't
it.
illegal
Well,
at the
it was,
time either.
right, it was pre.
You can't, I think that's a
Well, if
hard
it's not
line to
against
draw.
fire code, I don't know. I mean, if it wasn't within the safety rules, how could it be okay?
Well,
No matter how
they
long
weren't
ago,
cited, okay.
safety
They
is always
weren't
gonna,
cited back then, though, for over occupancy. They were cited in 2022.
right. Because there were over 200 people.
Can we say,
in 2022.
can we go there, John,
That's
John,
gonna
can we
happen
go
still.
here? Their occupancy exceeds, doesn't matter. Well,
It can't exceed the
it
permitted
exceeds,
occupancy.
it exceeds the requirement of the nightclub of 100 persons, requiring them to have sprinklers.
sprinklers.
If that's the life safety issue that trumps any, like, code, right? Life safety
Yeah.
trumps. So,
Well, it's the thought that you're saying that if you're going to go over 100 occupants, I think is the number, right?
Yes.
And at that time, we're not operating as a restaurant. That you have to comply with, you can't say you can't exempt them from complying with New York State Fire Prevention Code. I mean, you don't have that authority. Only the state could give that
oh,
variance.
that's interesting.
So, I mean, if they're operating as such, they still have to
So
comply with the
maybe what
safety
we say
requirement.
is notwithstanding our decision, nothing in this decision preempts or
Compliance with that code?
exempts them. I can't talk.
From the fire code.
From the fire code and applicable provisions of the fire code.
So if at some point a fire marshal makes an inspection and sees, people gathered for music and dancing, there's no food service, it's not
You shut
operating
it
as a
down.
restaurant,
In excess of 100
Shut it
people.
down.
unless there's a sprinkler system.
Right, in excess of 100 people.
Okay, I can live with that.
Well, I don't know that the number was exactly 100 either.
I think
Not sure, I think it's over 99. Is that
Yeah.
what it
it's not our, we just say they're not exempt from complying with.
is? Fire code. Okay,
Okay, I agree.
a little more complicated, but I think I
Thank
can
you.
figure it.
Agree on that.
On that
So
summation.
summarize what you agreed
Summarize it
to.
for us.
So we agree that they are a restaurant and a bar.
Mhm.
We agree that
And music.
they are pre-existing dancing and music.
Mhm.
To the extent that that definition, I don't know,
I don't
John,
think you
John,
need to go there.
I
You
don't
just
think we
say
need to know that.
nothing,
at any
nothing
point
in
in
this
time that they
decision.
are acting as a nightclub, they must comply with the provisions of a nightclub and occupancy, the fire code.
Well,
I don't even know
I
that
think
we need to say that.
we can say nothing in our decision exempts them from any applicable New York State
Okay,
Fire Code
I'm fine with that.
regulations.
I'm fine with that too.
That way we don't need to,
So we
try to
will
define
say
it further.
restaurant or with music and dancing. Compliance with all safety
Pray nothing
regulations of New York State, fire
I
and
just think,
safety
listen,
regulations.
I think we have to be careful not to get into an area where we're making broad interpretations and
Mhm.
suggestions that go beyond our jurisdiction here.
Mhm.
So for me, I'm going to continue to say that I'm answering the question, was there history? And I'm saying, yes, there was. Now, all these other stipulations get into a very gray area about whether or not we're in the position to make any kind of claims. I would want to, but I'm not sure we're in the position to do that.
but I think by saying nothing exempts them from complying with other things says our jurisdiction is confined, but putting the shoe on the other foot, we don't want them to come back and say, well, because we established a pre-existing use, we don't need to comply with current fire regs.
Just like we can condition a decision, we can condition this decision that they meet, in any case, they meet fire code as approved by the town fire marshal.
I'm comfortable with that.
Okay.
John, I'm upholding the building inspector's interpretation.
Me too.
Okay.
Oh, painful.
So, council, are we even close to being all right with all this?
I mean, her interpretation.
Well, I feel bad because John,
I think we're supposed to-
John, you don't have the benefit of the two hearings.
Right, right. It sounds to me like it's a 3-2,
It's a
but in a different
3-2.
direction now.
3-2, John, that's correct.
3-2 from the other side of your voice, one that way. I think I still have it.
You can call me if you
Yeah.
have any questions.
When you were both upholding him.
I am. It's a restaurant that had pre-existing music and dancing.
See what we.
All right, Sand Highway LLC, 147 Middle Highway in East Hampton, Suffolk, tax map number 300-146-5-11. The size and location is 14.49 acres at 146 Middle Highway, East Hampton, Suffolk, tax map number 300-146-5-11. The relief sought is an appeal of the principal building inspector pursuant to 255-835A of the town code. Appellants seek to challenge the determination of the inspector dated April 11, 2022, which interpreted the town zoning code and applicable law and determined that Sand Highway's proposal creation of a nature preserve sanctuary and or wildlife habitat at its mining site was prohibited. Among other things, the building inspector determined that only the East Hampton Town Board can designate a town-owned property as a nature preserve. The residential A3 zoning district does not permit wildlife and aquatic habitats as conforming uses. The creation of a lake as a principal use in the A3 residential zone is prohibited, and the creation of an artificial pond situated in groundwater requires a natural resources special permit pursuant to 255-420E3 of the town code. The zoning district is A3 residence, secret class is type 2. This was in mine, and I'm going to state from the outside that I will uphold the building inspector's determination. I think it is absolutely a clear determination. There is no case of pre-existing non-conforming or anything here. There are no issues. There are
Can
no
we just
issues of
quickly
that.
do
This
this?
is a residential zoned property. The existing was an approved mining, with an approved mining use. It had very strict parameters on it at that time through a DEC permit. Although the new owners who bought it did revise the DEC, which expanded their mining abilities, the requirements, the buffers are still very strict. The issue here comes down, it doesn't really come down to that. It comes down to whether or not the town code allows them to, or even us as a board, to determine whether or not they can be a sanctuary or preserve. I think the town code is absolutely clear that it is the town board that can only designate that as a nature preserve. Furthermore, the town code is also clear from a natural resources special permit, according to the 255-420E and 3 of the town code, that you can't penetrate the groundwater without a natural resources permit. That's the summation of my assessment. I don't think it's broader than that. I think it's a very narrow decision, and I'm upholding a decision of the building inspector.
The only thing that I would add is from, and it's set forth in Brian Frank's TAM, is that they clearly, even assuming that they could self-designate themselves as a nature preserve, they don't fit any of the criteria of section 182-10 of the town code, which sets forth the criteria for a
Right.
town nature preserve. They don't satisfy any of that criteria.
And even that criteria is supposed to take strictly, the town board is supposed
The
to.
town
take
board is
strictly
supposed to
in
consider it,
making
yeah.
their decision. Very strict.
Yeah.
No, I would add that the criteria is a really important point, and thanks for bringing it up, Joan, is that the town, as you just said, Mr. Chairman, if the town wanted to declare a parcel, a parkland, they would have to prove that one of these criteria, and perhaps more than one, applied to that site. We couldn't find, and was Frank expressed to us, they couldn't find any of the criteria that applied to this site. I think the overclearing of the site is a violation, of course. I think that the previous owner seemed to have moved forward a little more correctly in terms of following what the proper procedure would be with the DEC. And I'm agreeing with the chairman that this is a very narrow thing for us to consider. Can this property declare itself a nature preserve? And of course, the answer is pretty obvious to us that you can. But I do think that the state establishes criteria, towns establish criteria to prevent this very thing. And that is that anybody could declare, looking for whatever they wanted to do, preservation of a site or a tax break, that their land is a park. It doesn't apply here that this is any of the criteria can be fulfilled. Yeah.
I have the same,
Yeah.
there's no reason to repeat it. I'm upholding the building inspector as well for all the reasons just stated.
I'm upholding it too, as she stated in her April 12th, 2022 letter. One, their intended construction does not meet the town zoning laws definition.
Yep.
The A3 residential zone in which this property is located does not permit sanctuaries or wildlife habitats as conforming land uses. They're not on the use table for the A3 residential zone and are prohibited. And in any event, their intended construction would require a natural resources special permit from the ZBA, regardless of whether it's classified as nature preserve or wildlife habitat, in addition to all the other things that you already said in Brian Frank's TAM about the criteria for qualifying items A through H.
And now there was also a letter I should make the reference to from the attorneys, Bond, Schoenig, and King, saying that we did not have determination. We already made that decision, that our board made the determination that we do have jurisdiction, John, at the hearing date. Through council, legal. So I just wanted to get that on the record as well.
Also, I just want to add that it was important that I think the public did appear, and there were several people who spoke concerned about other issues that were not in front of us, but I thought there was a legitimate effort on their part to talk about potential danger, change in the neighborhood, and I thought
There were at least three.
clearly it could have an impact on the neighborhood as well.
Thank you. Next.
Thanks, next.
No, there's two more. 22 Shore Road LLC at 22 Shore Road, Amagansett, Suffolk Tax Map Number 300-131-8-7. The size and location is 48,327 square feet at 22 Shore Road, Montauk-on-Sea, Section A, map number 2438, Amagansett, Suffolk Tax Map Number 300-131-8-7. The description is to construct a 2,697 square foot, two-story residence with entry porch, a 1,805 square foot decking, a 240 square foot swimming pool, new sanitary system, dry wells, an approximately 725 square foot driveway with retaining walls, lower level parking, and to clear approximately 7,785 square feet of beach vegetation on a parcel of land containing duneland, beach vegetation, and tidal wetlands. The relief sought is a natural resources special permit pursuant to 255-420 of the East Hampton Town Code is required for this application and any other relief necessary. The zoning district is B residence, VE velocity flood zone, and the sacred classes type issue. Member McGivern?
Yeah, so this, the hearing was held on April 25th, 2023. Kate Osecki from East End Planning was the applicant. The application was dated February 1st, 2022. Nyla Oza of Oza Sabbath Architects presented plans dated February 1st, 2022, which were subsequently revised, dated May 22, 23, stamp received May 23rd, 2023, which reduced the lower level storage space by 200 square feet. The TAM was presented by Tyler Borsak, dated March 30th, 2023. The survey we were working off of was dated May 19th, 2022 by David Saskis. The DEC approved the modified plan on February 10th, 2022. Martyrs revegetation plan was revised in response to the TAM, and the revised Martyrs plan was dated March 30th, 2023. Martyrs grading plan for the cut and fill calculations was dated June 17th, 2022. And the construction protocol by Craft Engineering and the architects, Oza and Sabbath, was dated June 23rd, 2022. This application has a somewhat unique history. The first application was withdrawn in 2015. The second application was denied by the ZBA by decision dated December 6, 2016. There was an Article 78 appeal wherein the denial was upheld. That decision was dated January 15th, 2019. There was another denial by the ZBA dated June 9th, 2021. That denial was a 3-2 denial, with Roy participating as one of the dissenters, meaning he would have approved it. The history is well summarized in the TAM, as well as the differences between this third application that the board is hearing and the prior applications. I'm not going to read those numbers. I'll just refer to the TAM for John. Is that okay?
That's fine.
Yeah. So the property is located between a motel on one side and a single-family dwelling on the other. It's a beautiful, pristine piece of property that's 48,327 square feet, or 1.1094 acres to the high water line. Based on the setback to the 100-foot bluff crest for the primary dune, it leaves 22,607 square feet, or 0.5190 acres of potentially developable property. They're proposing to preserve 45% of this property, or 10,095 square feet, as a scenic easement, which was, even though I said I wasn't going to refer back to the prior applications, is a more significant easement than they had offered before. And the revegetation plan, importantly for my purposes, showed significant new vegetation within the area that they're setting aside as a scenic easement, which is bare in places. The elevation running from the street, Shore Road, it starts at about 8 feet and runs to about 27 feet when approaching the top of the first dune. The bulk of this project is landward of the crest of this first dune, if I'm counting from the street. The stated goal of the project was to integrate the house into the topography of the dune instead of just plunking a house down on the dune. And the stepped-up configuration more evenly distributes the mass and scale as compared to prior applications, in that it tries to work with the dune's topography. They also have proposed, I left this out, more screening and vegetation from the road to sort of mask the house somewhat. Importantly, again, unlike prior applications, it needs no variances or including a pyramid variance. There's a slight increase in building coverage, but the total a slight increase in building coverage, but the total coverage has gone down. And importantly, compared with other applications, they've reduced the clearing to 7,785 square feet, which is a reduction, a significant reduction from the first application that was heard, and a significant reduction, I guess, also from the second one of 2,054 square feet. They've also reduced the proposed size of the pool to 240 square feet. The footprint of the entire project holds to the 24-foot contour line of the dune, which was a concern in the prior denial. And so I think it's a factor that weighs in favor of the present application. I was very troubled by this application because it is such a pristine dune, and I feel like if the town really cared that they would have purchased the property, but the town didn't purchase the property through a CPF fund. So we're faced with basically a landowner that owns 1.1 acres and is looking to develop less than 25% of the property. In terms of what they're looking to do, and this is relevant to when we get to the standards of, are there alternatives, and is this the minimal amount or alternative designs or reasonable uses of the property? Their proposed gross floor area of the new application is 2/3 of what's permitted by the town. Their building coverage is less than 11.2% of what's allowed by the town. Their total coverage is 17. I think I've got this number wrong.
Lot 17.94.
17.94, where 50% is allowed. Thank you. And the clearing is 1/3 of what's allowed. What else? At the hearing, the stepped up design, it was presented that this stepped design of building into the dune was recognized by the American Institute of Architects Juror Award for an unbuilt Peconic area house, which apparently is a prestigious award. The applicant presented 18 neighborhood properties, a survey of 18 neighborhood properties, none of which had such a significant scenic easement. And also, many of the properties that were presented were either partially or we're partially within the coastal erosion hazard area line. This project is fully outside of the coastal erosion hazard area line, or if you want to say that it's landward of it. And it's a larger parcel on top of it. The issue of storage was addressed in a May 23 letter from the Adam Miller Group, in which they surveyed 13 properties, 10 of which had sheds, some multiple sheds, 6 had garages, and notwithstanding this, they offered to reduce the storage by 200 square feet. They explained that this isn't the architect explained that the storage area is not a cellar. It's actually functions with breakaway walls. It's not habitable space. The one thing I was unclear on, and I would like to hear from other board members, is the way they describe the structure of this. The pool decking is integral to the design of the house, and it's all landward of the contour line. The implication from my notes was that you couldn't deny the pool. If you denied the pool, you would be denying the entire design because it was so integrated into the design. They've also proposed, they have Suffolk County Health Department approval for a new IA system for the 4-bedroom house. In terms of the standards, preservation of natural resources, are there alternative, which is 255, 551, one, alternative uses of the property do not exist. It's a buildable lot, and the town has chosen not to buy it, and it's in a residential area. We're hard pressed to deny them a reasonable use of their property. I think they've come back with a genuine alternative design. It's thoughtful. It works with the dune. There's a 45% scenic easement. It avoids disturbing the crest of the second dune by hewing to the 24-foot line, which was a concern in the second denial. Also, in terms of compatibility with the neighborhood, 255, 540, they provided sufficient evidence that in terms of scale, visibility, and overall appearance, it will be in keeping with the neighborhood. And in terms of 255, 540, environmental protection, the TAM noted that the clearing has been minimized relative to prior applications, or that all the improvements will be landward of the 24-foot dune contour line and the coastal hazard erosion area line. And the scenic easement will be more intensively vegetated. So for those reasons, I'm somewhat reluctantly approving the application.
Thank you. I'm down the line.
Yep. Okay, well, thank you for that very thorough analysis. I think you covered a lot of the bases for all of us. I was part of the last decision, and I denied that previous application, and I had several reasons at that time. We talked about the sprawl and the amount of area that would be disturbed. We were concerned about some of the cut and fill. I was particularly concerned with the impact on the neighborhood because the previous architectural presentation had a house soaring over the roadway. And I think this application took into account some of my concerns as well as other board members, and that the design reflects that. I think that there is no pyramid violation at this point. There's no call for a period variance. I think that was an immediate improvement. These are very constrained, or not, if not so much constrained, but small lots all jumped on each other almost on one another. I think before I go any further, I think you have to say that the owner's right to build was a factor in this, and that is that this is one of those parcels, as Member McGivern said, that the town had an opportunity to do something about, but hasn't. Would we all like to see it preserved because of the pure beauty of the site? The answer is yes. But if the town doesn't move on that and there is no other particular alternative, we then have to say, what are we going to ask of an applicant, knowing he has a right to build? What are we going to ask of him to come to us with something that's palatable and we think does the least amount of environmental damage? So I think reducing the clearing, revegetating areas, the fact that the easement is in place, I think the footprint was reduced. I think staying behind the 22 and 24-foot contour lines in the construction envelope was part of the last discussion and the denial that happened 2 years ago now. And I think that was something that they responded to. I think there is going to be less excavation. The cut and fill ratios here went from 1,900 to 1,400 yards, a little less damage to the existing dune, meeting the pyramid regulations I meant. All FEMA regulations are observed, which makes a parcel like this difficult because staying at, the proper elevation, first floor elevations, means that the nature of any structure is it's going to seem large and imposing from the roadway. It is their third application, and I think what we're always saying is that if the board has recommendations, come back to us with some way in which you want to show us that you're serious about making improvements. I felt that this was a serious, well, I won't even use the word serious. I think this was a significant improvement on the last application. I wasn't part of the first one. The area below for storage, it was pointed out as breakaway construction, I think was reducing that. Had a factor in showing that there was a sincere effort to try to make this a little bit smaller. Reference to the pool that you asked about, I think that it's possible to have them eliminated the pool, but still have that deck. But their point of it being tied to it was to show us that the pool is less vulnerable in this circumstance than in others. So they've been 3 times in front of the board, and there were significant neighbor complaints, but I do think that at some point, we have to ask, what are the rights of the landowner here? And I feel that this application does reflect a sincere effort to try to do something that would fit in architecturally and environmentally. And so I'm willing to approve of this application.
Thank you, Ed. Denise?
Okay, this property is 48,327 square feet. It's for, I'm sorry? It's an NRSP for, because there are dunes, dune land, beach vegetation, and tidal wetlands involved. The property is located in a VE flood zone as per FEMA. The area is subject to high-velocity wave action from storms and is classified as a coastal high hazard area. This is a highly constrained parcel. 255-120 defines dunes, and all dunes are critically protected natural resources in the code. This application is not in keeping with 255-551D, preservation of natural resources. All structures must have alternatives, and they must be thought about and reflected with smaller structures. There is a large dune system on this property. The excavation into the dune for this project would impact the stability of that dune. The mass and scale of this project is not in keeping with the purposes of zoning. Minimizing disturbance to the secondary dune and beach vegetation is critical, and it has been recommended that the house be shifted to the north. The stabilization of a primary dune is a protection against storm surge and flooding. The buildable area on this site is jeopardized by bluff and dune locations. Overall, this project appears to be very similar to the 2020 application. Construction should take place away from the crest of the dune, also limiting excavation to maintain the life of the dune. The mass and scale of this project, the amount of excavation, the size of the residence, the swimming pool, the decking, is not in keeping with the standards in the town code. There are other alternatives that have not been explored. regarding the size of the house. The swimming pool and decking may not be in keeping with the constraints on the property. Again, swimming pools are amenities. There are alternatives with the placement of the house to minimize disturbance to natural features, which are dune and beach vegetation. There should be a more simplified proposal too, in terms of creating a below-ground parking and basement area, again, involving removal of dune land and vegetation. There are alternatives that have not been addressed, and the NRSP standards call for whether or not this application protects the central dune on the property, and it does not. There could be other alternatives. There could be other alterations. The pool, I don't think is appropriate for this site. A basement, too much unnecessary excavation, and underground parking should be eliminated because of the excessive excavation. I do not feel this application or project is in keeping with standards 255-420 of the town code. And for these reasons, I am denying the application.
Thank you. Terry?
Okay, all right, just for your knowledge, I was part of, I think, both two previous denials on it. And I was one of the deniers in the 2020 application. One thing, the presenter was Denise Schoen, from Adam Miller Group. No, did I get that right?
Yes.
Yes, Adam Miller Group, okay. I thought I heard Katie Oseki's name in there before.
She was the original
Oh,
applicant.
okay.
Agent.
Anyway, so Ms. Schoen made a very good presentation. She was very concise on the improvements that they made, the elimination of the redesign enabled them to eliminate the variance for the pyramid violation. And also the architect, Elay Oza, gave some good explanations for the FEMA compliance and the way that the basement would be handled with the breakaway walls, the storage, and the underground parking. Now, this project was very similar to 2020. I was one of the deniers in 2020, and actually I had great hopes with all the discussion of the 24 contour line and the penetration of the 24-foot contour line in 2020. They did take that into account to some degree. However, I have to say I was disappointed when I saw that what they ended up doing was putting the pool and pool decking, pool patio right up to that line. The architect did discuss how they were going to minimize some disturbance. However, I feel that in this case, this pool, having a pool on this project is not in keeping with the NRSP standards of 255-551. As Member Severie said, a pool is not by right, it's an amenity. There were a number of neighbors that had objections to the project, and on May 23rd, 2023, the Adam Miller Group did send in a document addressing the concerns of Jonathan Wallace, Norm Edwards, Nicholas Gregory, and the storage space questions. They listed a number of other properties on Shore Road that had garages and things. The problem with that is there's nothing on there other than that they have these things. It didn't say when these things went into place, what code was in effect at the time of these. So I really have to discount that. I think overall there is an improvement in the house itself. I'm kind of on the cusp. I am definitely denying the pool and the patio. And I have to say that there was a document submitted on May 25th, 2023 by Jeff Bradman as an agent for the owner of the White Sands Motel. And it is a pretty extensive document and does get into a lot of suggestions as to things that could be done differently. One of those, moving the house more toward the north and toward the street.
But I thought the problem was the IA system.
Yeah, there was some questions on that, and I believe in that same document that there were suggestions made also in the Jeff Bragman document. However, I do think the improvements on the house itself were okay. It wasn't, the GFA only went down like less than 100 feet, so I was disappointed in that also. Went from 2775 to 2697. However, I think I am approving I'm approving the house itself, but I am denying the pool and the pool patio. I think it does not meet 255, 51. The preservation and natural resources. I still think the pool and anything going near that contour line could potentially impact the natural resources and not in compliance with 255, 551D, preservation of the natural resources. We all agree, all sides agree that the dune, that preservation of the dune is critical to eliminating or managing the runoff from stormwater for the entire neighborhood, not just for that lot itself. And so there are alternative designs for smaller buildings or structures for use yard. And I think the pool and the pool patio is one thing that can be eliminated from this project. I'm denying that.
Thank you. And yes, I was one of the approvers of the last one. But I do, with this application, I do see the collective wisdom of the board at that time. It came down to me, I was part of that original one, and the original one basically took no respect for the dunes and just wiped it out. And so I thought the second one was quite a bit approved. This one goes quite a bit farther, and I think they spent some good collaborative time looking at it and dealing with the concerns of the zoning board of the second decision, the 24 contour. And I think they respected that. I think they respected as much as they could in placing this house where it is, trying to get over the dune. I don't go into it much further, but I do agree with approving this application. You okay, council?
Mm-hmm.
Finally. We have Faro Beach Incorporated, 3 South Lake Drive, Montauk, Tax map number 300. Thank you. Good night. 32-3-14. The size and location is 59,871 square feet, excluding wetlands, at 3 South Lake Drive, Montauk. The description is an application has been submitted for existing renovations that have been already made on a number of resort buildings. A stop work order was issued on February 26, 2014. The applicant has applied for approval of decks and trellises for all 6 of the buildings, interior renovations, converting the office building to a motel unit, reconfiguring the existing parking lot, creating a new parking lot, and installing a new low light nitrogen sanitary system. The relief sought is a natural resources special permit pursuant to 255-420 of the East Hampton Town Code, and 5 variances in addition to any other relief necessary or required for this application as follows. Variances of 10.88 feet and 9.86 feet for Building A and Building B respectively from 255-1120 to allow decks and trellis to remain where 20 feet is required. Variances of 54.2 feet and 93.88 feet for Building A and F respectively from 255-430 to allow deck trellis to remain, and a proposed setback of 77.36 feet for the south driveway parking lot where 100 foot is required. The zoning district is A residence, AE flood zone, elevation 9, the secret class is type 2. Whose application was this? Okay, Ed, go for it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The board will remember that the hearing for this application was held on May 2nd, 2023, and we were working from a survey that was dated January 10th, 2023. I've got that. I must have that wrong. Oh, no, I've got it right. I'm sorry. The applicant was represented by Andy Hammer and Britton Bistrian. An NRSP and 5 variances are required for this project. We received a letter of support for the project from Frank Bindle, the immediate neighbor to the west, dated April 24th, 2023. And we received an extensive letter from Tom Rice, Cheryl Chrisman, and Noel Arikian, dated April 27th, 2023. In a long hearing, the status of the existing structures was discussed and a convoluted legal history of the project was presented. In the 1950s, this parcel was the Montauk Motor Corp. And was zoned MD for Motel District. In 1982, a use variance was added to the property to cover the addition of a single-family residence. There were no wetlands cited as being present on the parcel at that time. CFO was issued in February 1982, and it listed 8 resort units and a single-family residence as being on the property. No covenants were listed at that time. The 1982 use variance stated that one of the existing buildings was to be converted to office space. It is unclear whether that conversion ever took place. That building, referred to as Building A, was residential space before the current owner purchased this property. Purchased this property in 2013. We also had a response from Principal Building Inspector Ann Glennon dated January 15, 2020 to a request from Andy Hammer for a clarification of the code 255-1-40B concerning non-conforming uses. That response was found that the current use of the property was not an expansion of the non-conformity because as either office or residence, it was still resort use. The applicant wants to allow Building A to remain in seasonal residential use. They propose to eliminate 1 residential unit by combining 2 units into one inside of a single existing structure. The net result would be 7 units plus the house on the property. The decks on the units do not appear on the 1984 survey, and the applicant is looking to legalize those decks. They're also looking to legalize 1 deck attached to the residence. The applicant is offering to install an IAOWTS sanitary system and to revegetate and reduce the clearing on the site by 8,315 feet. These are significant measures. The issue of the south parking lot is a large one for us. The applicant proposes to create parking for 7 cars south of the residence and 7 cars north where the current parking lot exists. Previously, south of the residence, an area large enough to accommodate more than 20 vehicles was cleared, leveled, and gravel was installed within jurisdiction of wetland setbacks. The applicant has stated that the lot was initially approved by the highway commissioner, but that later, that's the same department placed a pile of dirt and gravel at the base of the driveway into the lot to stop it from being used as additional parking for Crow's Nest. Later, the gravel pile was replaced by boulders in the same location. The applicant feels that the mitigation offered with the new IA system and the revegetation plan should allow for approval of the applicant's request. And Britton Bistrian was effective in pointing out just how much Lake Montauk might benefit from the completion of these measures. Tom Rice, representing himself, Chrisman, and Arikian, stated that while they had no objections to the variance request concerning the rental units, they felt that past history had shown that the parking lot had been actively used by the Crow's Nest for supplemental parking, and he and those he represented felt that if this request was granted, a new request was granted to allow for the south, a renewal of use of the south parking lot, that area would once again be used in a similar fashion. When it was suggested that the existing parking lot might serve to provide enough parking for the complex by parking over the IA system, Andy Hammer agreed to have the applicant consider that option. I have no problem approving this application except for the south parking lot. I think that the addition of the IA system and the revegetation on the site are a fair trade-off for the approvals that are sought for the resort units and the residents, but I don't feel that allowing the establishment of the parking lot allows this application to rise to the level of granting an NRSP. reviewing NRSP standard 255-5-51, D1 and 2, natural resources would not be preserved by allowing the south parking lot to be constructed, and that alternative uses and designs do exist that would not require building this close to the wetlands. I think that when we brought up the fact that, I think it was mentioned first by the chair, that covers could be put in place over the system, and the system could be positioned in a way that will still allow for parking north of the residence rather than south and closer to the wetland. I thought that was an excellent suggestion. And I think that there was a concern, as I mentioned, by the neighbors there that in the past, there was bad faith on the part of this owner, and that parking lot was used as an additional parking for Crow's Nest. During the hearing, we did not get that from anyone associated with the application, that it actually had been used that way, but both personal and the submitted evidence there shows that it had been used that way. And I think there is legitimate fear that providing that much parking, it's an awful big, large parking lot. And the way they've drawn it, of course, is they've only used 7 spaces, but I think we have to worry about what would happen as that moves forward. So I'm willing to approve the variances that are required for the rental units and the residents, but I am denying allowing the south parking lot to be constructed.
That includes the decks. and
Even with the
traverses.
revised?
The revised parking lot?
Yeah.
Which revised parking lot?
They sent a revision.
Yeah, there's a,
Which is the one on the south.
Oh, they still want the parking on the south, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But they did eliminate, okay, so it was okay, fine. Okay, Terry?
When did they send the revision?
It was a survey,
It's in
yeah.
Andy's submission post, it's,
data received May 16th, I think.
I saw that. Okay,
yeah, May 16th.
all right. Well, I am in agreement with Co-Chair Johan. I am okay, even though some of the variances are large for the deck and trellis for building A. Building F actually has a larger variance. These are de minimis, I think, and not any problem with any negative impact on the natural resources for that. I too am going to deny the parking area in the south, as discussed previously and at the hearing, that they could put the parking all in the original parking area and in the area where the IAOW WTS is going to be. The building A was the building, maybe I missed this just now, but building A was the original motel office. And I believe they're going to keep it as a motel office. There's not going to be a rental of that, correct?
No, no,
Okay.
they want it to be used as residential, have seasonal residential use, building A.
They're swapping out the density.
They're swapping that with the house?
Swapping that with the unit that they're combining.
They're combining one of the units,
So
the
it's,
double units into one.
it's being reduced overall to 7 units.
Mhm.
The house remains a residence.
The house remains a residence,
Right.
but building A was the original motel residence, and that was a modification
That's the
for denied.
office.
The office.
They're gonna,
Yes.
they're requesting that be a unit by combining, by reducing from 7, they're going from 8 units to 7 to allow that to have that
Reducing
happen.
density.
Okay, in my notes, I have that the A is only going to be used for the motel office use.
No,
No.
That was part of the earlier decision, was that the 1987 decision,
1982.
1982.
And yeah, and we denied.
So they're asking for relief, they're asking for us to modify that decision.
We already denied that modification back in 2019.
no application.
This was the May 16th.
I'm sorry, maybe I missed this, but, okay, so it will be a total of 7 rental units?
That's right,
Mhm.
on the residence.
I don't know that I like that, but I can't claim who was involved in that. too. Um, So, I am denying the parking area in the south. And I am approving the other variances for the decking, respective decking and trellises. They de minimis in terms of the number of them and not going to have any negative impact on the environment. The parking area will be revegetated, condition that it will be revegetated, and
Thank you,
revert back to the original.
Okay. I agree with everyone. In terms of the non-conforming uses, section 255-140B of the East Hampton Town Code, Ann Glennon did address in a letter, made the interpretation of that section that the use as proposed is not an expansion of the existing non-conforming use. The demolition of the pre-existing non-conforming cottages on the premises to be rebuilt the same with less units and not to exceed the existing total gross floor area would be permitted with approval from the zoning board, planning board, architectural review board, and any other authority having jurisdiction. In addition to this interpretation, I feel the project is not proposing to intensify the use in any way. They're not proposing any change in the footprint of the pre-existing buildings, and they are not proposing an expansion or increase in the floor area. I agree, the southern parking lot should be eliminated altogether. A separate driveway is really not necessary, and using the existing driveway in the central parking area is sufficient. There really is no reason to approve a separate entrance from the South Lake Drive to the new parking lot to the south. And in the past, the driveway was misused to support commercial operations at the Crow's Nest, which neighbors complained and town officials had to get involved and blocked access. In terms of the clearing, I agree with the recommended project condition number 3, a landscape revegetation plan that brings the property closer to conformance with HPOD regulations than the one dated last revised September 22nd, 2022 should be prepared. Since I'm not in favor of the second entrance for access and parking, and in lieu of that, more revegetation can be increased on the site. 8,315 square feet of vegetation is proposed, and the proposed clearing is 32,288, when the allowable clearing is 17,484. In an HPOD zone, this is just not acceptable. And of course, a septic upgrade will benefit the site as well. In terms of the rest of the project, I think a nice job has been done and is in keeping with the standards outlined for the variance standards and the NRSP standards. Also, for the record, the East Hampton Town Planning Board also had the same views about the parking as we do.
I agree with everything that was said. I actually have 2 points, and this is based on their May 16th, 2023 submission. One was they offered to revegetate up to 9,950 square feet. Maybe not as much as Member Cerise wanted, but I thought we should get that number on the record, that they offered to go up to 9,950. there was a sentence, my second point was that there was a sentence in the, read along with me, in the letter that I haven't been able to puzzle through, which says, furthermore, the southern parking area is designed to provide parking for residential use that is approved on the lot, which is an as-of-right improvement for 2 of the 7 cars that we designed this lot to serve. So what I'm not clear on is, I think his position was that with respect to the southern parking area, they have 2 spaces as of right. Does that make sense to you?
They have 2
Now,
spaces.
right by the residence.
Well, we're denying their proposal for the southern
Parking lot.
parking, period.
But the residence is right by the other parking lot too.
And the
Yeah,
central
one was the
parking lot
least.
accommodates like 15 parking
All right.
spots, negating the need for the southern
All
lot.
right, and then I'm over reading into it.
I think our concern probably, if I might, would be not to go beyond
The question,
what is the minimum requirement of parking.
right.
Mhm.
Go ahead.
That's it. I otherwise agree with what's been said.
I'm going to agree as well. I have nothing else to add. John, you okay?
Yep.
Adjourn? No, we still have, oh no, we have resolutions, we have draft minutes. We have draft minutes of June 13th.
They're yours too.
And when we do the
Oh my goodness,
resolutions, let's do a real brief.
The resolutions?
Oh, we have to do that? Oh, I don't have to, thank you.
But John doesn't have them. You have the
You
resolutions?
don't have them already? They weren't
Yeah,
sent?
we have
Oh,
them.
we saw
Yeah, we
them.
have
Saw them.
Can we base our,
Yeah, we can
I mean,
decide,
I'm
we
fine.
can vote on
Yeah.
it.
I may,
Yeah, I mean, I didn't bring hard
I
copies
did
for
see
you,
the
so-
updates, yes.
On all
We're
of
good.
them?
And my dissenting opinion
Okay,
was on
because there
that.
were some things that
Yes.
needed
Yeah,
change,
no,
and
I
I don't want to
changed- I
agree to
changed
something I
those.
didn't agree to.
They revised them.
Right, they were revised, this is, I think yesterday, nothing since yesterday, all right.
No,
Did we get sent a copy?
I got,
Yes,
yeah,
we
on
did.
the updates,
Yeah.
okay.
I think Maura sent it to everybody.
All right, so the first one's Ed's.
Draft minutes.
Draft minutes.
Oh, draft minutes of me, okay. I'd like to make a motion to approve the draft minutes of June 13th, 2023 for the East Hampton Town Zoning Board of Appeals.
Second,
Concur.
I concur.
Concur, thank you. Resolutions, Robert Palmer, 45 Seaview Avenue, Montauk, map number 351-1-3.2.
Describe it? Okay. This was, quickly. This was an application that asked for an addition on the north side of the house, a pool to the west side of the house, and they were going to add a septic system on the east and south, the southeast of the house. There was a couple of other minor requests in there. There was a fire pit. There was moving the air conditioning units. A portion of this had been previously approved but not acted on, and then they were back in front of us. It was a unanimous vote, I believe.
No,
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 You-
I
I
sent
voted
in a
for it.
dissenting opinion.
Okay.
and I dissented on the pool fencing, fire pit, and what else?
So I didn't have that in front of me.
Well, they were all pool related.
Yes.
Joan, did you approve?
I don't remember.
Yes, you did.
Yes, you did,
Yes,
Joan.
Joan.
I thought I did. Okay.
Okay. So then in the case of Robert Palmer, 45 Seaview Avenue, Montauk, Suffolk County Tax Map 300-051-01-3.2, I'd like to make a motion to accept this determination as written.
Second,
Concur.
I concur. Thank you. Next, we have Peter Joyce at 10 Fall Street, Montauk, Suffolk Tax Map number 300-28-5-10.
I'm sure we all remember this one. This is our landscape contractor who put in a
Yes.
pool, patios, some fencing for
Bathtub pool.
garden plants. It was an AC unit, no, a generator, I believe it was, all without benefit of a permit. However, in fact, this was a unanimous approval of this decision, and it was contingent on increasing an already existing scenic easement that they had on the property, which basically protects the rest of the property right up to where some of those formerly illegal structures were. So in the matter of Peter Joyce at 10 Full Street, Montauk, tax map 300-028-05-08, and make a motion to approve. The determination is written, the resolution is written.
Second.
Concur.
I concur.
Concur. Next, we have David Sullivan at 8 Bendigo Road, Narragansett, map number 300-152-1-11.2.
This was, if you remember, a beautiful piece of property, 11 plus acres on Gardner's Bay. 7 plus acres are set aside for scenic easement. It's been largely left untouched. One of the issues was a walkway that they had put in the back of the house, which we approved because it was a better alternative than having people trample all over the dune vegetation. And the second question was a shed, and whether the shed should be moved. The shed had originally not been in the wetlands, but then when the wetlands were remarked or reflagged, it landed up being needing a wetlands variance. And I believe it was 3-2 on the shed.
Yes.
4-1 on the generator.
And 4-1 on the generator. Thank you.
Teamwork
Teamwork.
makes the dream work.
So in the matter of David Sullivan, 8 Bendigo Road, Amagansett, Suffolk County Tax Map number 300-152-01-11.2, I make a motion to approve the resolution as written.
I'll second it.
Concur.
I concur. Thank you. With that, we adjourn the meeting, Vice Chair.
I'd like to make a motion to close the June 27, 2023 meeting, Zoning Board of Appeals, Town of East Hampton Zoning Board of Appeals, public hearing and work session at 10:21 p.m.
Second.
Concur.